Notice and time and place of this committee meeting was publicized by notifying the area news media, by updating the OPPD website, and by mailing such notice to each of the district directors on August 8th, 2017. We're gonna tape, this is not being live streamed, we got a little glitch, so we're taping it, and then as soon as we can tweak that, we'll put it on our website. So anyway, it's not live streamed, but that will be up, I don't know how long it'll take, so. Anyway, with that, and then I told the governance committee we met earlier this morning, I've got to take off at about 11 for a business situation I got to go to. I'll be back at 1, but Tom and you guys sure will miss me, but anyway, with that, let's get started. Director Hurley will not be here today at this meeting or the regular meeting, so with that though, we'll get started. And Director Yoder, by the way, is running just a little bit behind. We're just gonna, so he texted us and said he's just a little bit behind. So with that, we'll get going with finance report. Director McGuire.
Okay, on last Monday, we had a finance and audit insurance pre-committee meeting that we discussed a lot of the stuff that we're going to discuss today. And I will take it over to Javier and for the July financial report.
Sure. We're going to do safety.
Oh, we need to say
Oh,
first?
yeah.
We will do a quick safety briefing.
I'm learning.
A new guy. Very good. The new guy. Well, I was getting ready to. So obviously, we're on the 9th floor of the west side of Energy Plaza. In the event we have to evacuate, we could use the elevators and move down to the main floor and exit on the 17th Street side. In the event of a fire, we would ask you not to use the elevators, but use the stairs. We would go all the way down to the main level, exit on the 17th Street side. In the event of a tornado, we don't anticipate one today, maybe storms later tonight, they say, possibly. But we would actually go to the garage area on the west side of the building. The AD and the first aid kit are one on top of each other to the right of the elevators. Is anybody here certified in the use of an AED or in CPR? So we have multiple choices here. Mark, would you call 911 in the event that we need it? All right, very good. Sounds good. Let's see here. I think that's it for our safety briefing. Any questions? Thank you, Bobby.
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to go through the July financials. Quiet month, pretty much everything on target. And just to note, I think this is, according to the team, this is probably the month where we have kept the net income as close to the projected budget as we've ever been. We're $100,000 off the budget on net income. Remarkable. We didn't necessarily hit it in all the right categories, but at the end of the day, the net income was pretty much in line with what we budgeted. Retail revenues in July were $111.1 million, which is $2.8 million under budget. However, off-system sales revenues were $15.8 million, which was $6.5 million over budget. And other income for July was $5.7 million, which is $1.6 million over budget. O&M maintenance expenses, excluding fuel and purchase power for July, were $24.4 million, which is $2.8 million under budget. And fuel and purchase power expenses for July were $36.7 million, which was $8 million over budget. So we sold quite a bit of power, but we bought quite a bit of power too. On the revenue side, the off-system revenue, everything was in line. If you remember, we had a very warm June. Revenues in June were significantly higher than budget. July were coming in as budgeted. And with the weather, if you look out the window here in August, that'll be an interesting month. For next month, how the August revenues. My guess is they're not going to come in as high as budgeted. We had a really warm June, not a warm August. These all results in a net income for July of $36.8 million, which is $100,000 over budget. What I would like to point out here, and it's not on the summary, but on, I think it is page 4 of your my presentation here. For the net income for the year-to-date net income was $73.1 million, which is $20.9 million over budget. So we've had a good year so far. A really good place to be in. Again, going into a cooler than normal August. Always good to have positive net income, accumulated net income, and we have good cash balances. I'm expecting to use some of those cash balances and that net income that we've accumulated through the year in the month of August, perhaps in the month of September, and how the weather continues to turn out. Any questions, comments?
Then next, we're going to go to the annual report on interest rate of customer security deposits. Here, I'll let you know that also.
As you all know, we collect customer deposits from customers, and we hold onto those for a period of months, sometimes over a year, depending on the customer. And while we hold on to those deposits earn interest, and that interest is rebated back to the customer. It's their money, and eventually that both the interest and the deposit are returned to the customer. And we credit the customer with the prevailing interest rate, which had been, as of last year, was 0.75%. That was the amount that we were crediting to those customer deposits. Short-term interest rates have gone up, and we are now adjusting that and proposing to the board that the new rate at which customers accrue earnings on their deposits to be 1%, up from 0.75%. Again, just acknowledging that interest rates continue to go up.
And this is just an annual housekeeping.
It is a reporting item.
But this is a good time to discuss when we require deposits of customers. I don't know if that would be Julie to answer that. And then how can the new customer avoid security deposits?
Sure. So when we have a new customer who signs up for service, we will typically request a deposit, or they can also provide a guarantor. So somebody who is an existing customer who has a good pay history can sign for that customer. One of our most, I'll say, convenient and maybe more popular ones is now we allow people, if they sign up for automatic bill pay, where it's automatically debited from the customer's bank account each month, then we will waive the deposit on residential customers.
I think that last one is important, and it's new, and it's, people want that.
How much is the deposit?
For residential customers, it's typically $100.
Is there a deposit for commercial customers?
Yes.
Yes.
So yes, commercial customers also get a deposit, or they can get a guarantor or a surety bond.
And for commercial, it's typically the highest months.
Right. And I may have misspoken. I think we made, for residential, it's 200. Sorry about that.
Because every of these is 200 also.
Yeah. And it's based on the average highest 2 months. And then the other thing, we do assess additional deposit if we don't have a deposit and someone falls into arrears. To protect that debt, we will assess additional deposit.
There's no other questions. I'm going to go to the legal fees and expense report for the third quarter, and the $305,565.80 was paid to Fraser Stryker this year, this quarter. And then legal fees from Troutman Sanders totaled $41,816. It's a little less than what we have in the which is good. Let's see if it's on
I'm sorry, you said the 305 is less than what is typical for business?
These are a little higher.
I've got a question on that too. This is a detail of these charges that they provided the responsible manager, so each person requesting the legal sees it.
They see it on the old roll-up.
Each division, it's their call basically, right? And then you see the overall.
Each business unit has their own budget. They use legal services. They get to see what's been used, and then it all rolls up into my organization, and we review it.
And you break those up for your manager.
Sure, what we'll have is that will provide the senior management a detailed listing of all the related activity on the legal front, whatever that may look like, and kind of where we are on each of the cases. And we typically have done that
But even to the board in closed session around the conversation.
Sure.
But we see them more often.
Yeah.
That's why I did it out there. I figured that's what I did.
Okay, and next we have the retirement plan, reporting item for the second quarter. I would mention that the retirement plan meeting was held last Tuesday, and Dr. Yoder and I attended it, and where all the specific people that are players in the retirement plan gave their reports and everything, so it was very interesting, and we have very, very good news about this, and I'm going to have Javier discuss it a little bit.
You know, this is one where you take the good news when you have them. The markets have been favorable in the past year. The retirement plan fund market value at the end of the second quarter was $967.1 million. This compares to the same market value at the beginning of the quarter of $942.7 million. So almost $25 million, a little bit over $25 million gain in market value. We've contributed, our employees contributed $2.9 million to the plan. OPPD contributed $13.3 million. The plan paid benefits of $22.6 million. All of these are quarterly figures. However, and this is the good news, the investment market value of the portfolio increased by $30.8 million. Now, again, remember, this is not always going to be the case. The market goes up and down, but this quarter was a very good quarter for the plan. The allocation was 55.4% equity and 44.6% fixed income in alignment with our investment policy. And you can see in your report the breakdown by equities and fixed income, both domestic and international, their market values, quarterly return, and what the index return was, which if you total that, index return should have been 3.1%. We realized 3.3%, so a little bit higher than the index return. Just very good news, and is a reflection of all the portfolio managers that we have working for OPPD, actively managing the fund on behalf of our employees and retirees.
I think the other thing is that there is a new real estate fund that is not in here yet because they're just starting to put money into it. And we'll get a report on that the next quarter.
Correct. And this is again in an effort to further diversify the portfolio. We're adding these new asset categories, which we'll start reporting in the third quarter.
The district contributions of 13.3 million, how does that compare to recent history?
That's pretty much in alignment with what we've done.
Okay, next we have an interesting report of claim settlement of $50,000 to Skyline Manor. I'm wondering who wants to handle this. Mr. Peck, you want to handle it, or Javier, do you want to handle it?
I can handle it. I can describe it. If there are any more questions, we can. I have some that can help you here. Skyline Manor, customer of OPPD, current customer of OPPD, a few years ago had some issues. They fell behind in their payments. Worked with them, and through many months, probably over a year of working with them and getting them to pay on time and submit payments, didn't really work. Eventually, the organization filed for bankruptcy, and through the bankruptcy proceedings, there was a legal argument that a portion of the payments that they have paid to OPPD should be returned on behalf of the creditors for bankruptcy proceedings. The original alleged amount that they were claiming back was $123,000, and we settled for $60,000 with help from our legal counsel. Whether or not I personally agreed with it or not, that was not the case. Legally, there was a case that was supportive of the settlement. And this is a reporting item. We have to report any settlement, any claim in excess of $50,000 following Nebraska statute 84-713. That's what the settlement was, just a little bit higher than the threshold.
Steve, you may want to talk about the 90-day kind of requirement within the bankruptcy process. And again, this agreement was reached. We collected the dollars And so we've collected the dollars, now we're having to refund part of those based on the settlement. You may want to talk a little bit about the
Sure.
bankruptcy process.
You bet. Javier described it well. The bankruptcy code has a provision in it that when a debtor files for bankruptcy, the trustee has the ability to bring claims to bring back into the bankruptcy estate any payments that were made 90 days ahead of bankruptcy for what's called an antecedent debt, a prior debt, which of course we were one of those. Normally utility bills are paid in the ordinary course, but in our case, we worked with them, set up a payment plan, and so the trustee made the argument that some of the payments, as Javier indicated, were preference payments, is the term under the bankruptcy code. And we had a good argument and have a good argument to the contrary, but there's clearly exposure here, so it's why we recommended to management that this matter be settled.
So Steve, we weren't the only ones trying to trust you went back.
Absolutely.
Collect money from, we just happened to be in the pool.
You're absolutely correct, I should have mentioned that.
And this has been going on for years.
Right.
I remember hearing about this
Right.
works. I mean, obviously, it's hard to shut them off. But I guess at the end of the day, what did we learn? They got into us for a good amount of money. What have we done to, because you got to be fair and equitable to everybody, right? So what have we done to fix this situation?
Yeah, so I think our procedure would be, obviously we wouldn't let it go as far along, but really make that kind of conversation with the owners and the operators that we will disconnect, right? What we heard from the bankruptcy attorneys very clearly is that you didn't disconnect them, therefore you didn't follow your policy. But we had, I think, the right sensitivity around this, and that's why these are tough kind of situations. And so, I think our perspective is we probably would have engaged with the owners of that manor or a common business like that sooner, as they do get behind. I think we've changed some processes on our delinquency for commercial and made those changes, so we'll see that and hear that sooner and quicker so we can make those actions. I'm not sure we would disconnect retirement facility, but we'll certainly make that conversation direct with the owners and let them know that we may have to based on some legal precedents that we've received. So it is a balance. I think our team did the right sensitivity. I think we worked with the holding group on getting those dollars back into OPPD, where we were really back to all of that past debt was paid, and we felt good about that, and they were on a track, and then obviously went into the bankruptcy process, and that's where this was kind of clawed back from that process. So.
I agree with you not disconnecting. This is a nursing home that has patients with respirators. Let's be real here.
And
We're
those
not
folks
gonna
are, and
disconnect.
those folks are making their payments each month. The issue with the management.
The issue with the management.
I will share with you, we made contacts with the Douglas County organizations that needed to be involved, the state of Nebraska organizations, the federal government around this because of some of the subsidies that they may be receiving because of their clientele. And it really was, there was not a whole lot that we could do through those agencies to assist with that. They were going through their own processes at the county and the state and the federal level with that organization. So there is this sensitivity. I'll be honest with you, I think we handled it right. We would probably now see that delinquency quicker, earlier, faster, and we would engage with it quicker, faster. So
That's,
yep.
Well, basically read the short reporting, considering their bankruptcy and we're involved. Without giving out the customer's name, are there any other customers, particularly I suppose commercial customers who are having closer to that situation? Or is it that we work out
I don't know. It doesn't. I
I'm not
don't know that
aware.
answer yet, but I would tell you that even in some cases, they may be going through some bankruptcy or restructuring, and sometimes utilities are not included in that restructuring, right? It may be just a debt restructuring, or maybe some other kinds of issues. depends on the, kind of the nature of what the needs of that business are. So I don't think we've seen them as big as that or as big as this for a long time, so.
Okay, if there's no other questions, we'll continue to a board action item, which is to rescind a tariff, the forward-looking tariffs for Southwest Power Co. transmission forming the rate that we actually voted on last October, and then to go back to the old template, which was based on historical data. I'm going to have Javier explain this for us.
I'll try to explain to the best of my ability, although I do have help in the room on this. I think it's straightforward. OPPD, in an effort to continue to improve our contracts, our tariffs, our templates, we found an opportunity to modify the district's formula rate template within SPP. The current template we have is a historic-looking template where we saw the opportunity to change that to a forward-looking template for us to charge for a rate to be calculated on a forward-looking as opposed to a historic-looking. It was an effort to refine the way we collect revenues. At the end of the day, it's not increasing the revenue picture, it's just aligning it more accurately with the time. At the time, we thought it was a very minor modification, which is what Resolution 6141 allowed us to do, to go further and request for this. After chatting with Burke and engaging with them quite a bit, it was clear that FERC staff indicated a desire to make, in addition to these changes, make several other changes to the formula rate template that we had not discussed with the board. And for that reason, we told FERC, well, we need to go back to the board and have more discussion. It's obviously not ready for us to proceed. So at this point, we're asking the board to rescind that resolution. We'll take this back to the drawing board. We'll continue to work with FERC, and if there's any change that we may want to pursue in the future, we'll bring it back to the board. We'll brief the board and go through the same process again to get the authorization for a new rate template. But at this point in time, we don't think it's fair for us to continue down that path. Therefore, we're asking the board to rescind that resolution.
No further questions? Just.
While you're looking for that, and Jim and I were just discussing that kind of item there, but then we had a quick discussion, it would probably be on a consent agenda on a regular board meeting, because it's an action item today. So that's going to pop up on the consent agenda. If you want to ever take it off and say, oh, by the way, between Tuesday and Thursday, something came up, then that's, so they'd be prepared to do it, but most likely it's a consent agenda. So just throw it out of all the way.
Okay, we did have a monthly oversight pre-committee meeting, Mr. Miller and I attended last Thursday. It was at the same time that we had the decommissioning audit committee, which was a very interesting committee. I'm going to explain a little bit about it first of all. There were three nuclear professionals who we have hired to come and give a deep dive for us. In the nuclear, we've had it before, and this is not for the decommissioning. Mr. Wayne Gordon, Maria Triple, and Mr. Snyder. And the type of topics that I just want to go through what they went through. I mean, they were there for how many days? 2-3 days? 2 full days, looking at everything. They looked at regulatory assurance, emergency planning, corrective action, and human performance, nuclear oversight, security, chemistry, environmental and radiation protection, industrial safety, nuclear safety and culture report, operations and training, maintenance, work management, and also project control. So it's a really deep dive. I have to admit that this, I've been to these before, and this is the most positive report I've ever gotten. These guys are usually extremely critical, which they were again. They always have some positive critiques to give, some good constructive criticism. But they came away with the ideas that we have really made the turn. That OPPD and their employees, first of all, have bought into the idea that this is a new day, that their goal now is to safely decommission and this plant and put it into dormancy. It was the first time I really saw that it was all the OPPD running it. You know, before I was there, when Exelon was in charge. This time, all the OPPD was in charge. You know, Energy Solutions was there. I don't think they said a thing hardly. They did not say one thing. They were just there in the back. And the OPPD people handled it well. And kudos to all of them. They did a great job. And it's been a very emotional year for them, for all of OPPD. And it sort of showed too that it wasn't just the people up in the plant, that other people around OPPD are all bought into this and are helping with this. So I just wanted to say kudos to you, Jerry, and to your whole group. It was very impressive. I don't know if Mike wants to say anything about that. You were up there too. Yeah. I know I said Rick, sorry, but it was Mike, not Rick. I wasn't there the whole day. After that, we had a tour. It's a whole different look out there. It's so nice. It's up, you know, everything's down. There was some places underneath the turbine building where we rarely went because it was usually very, very hot and very, very noisy. You're down there, and that's where they're taking out all the insulation and all the asbestos and stuff and everything. And mainly seeing a lot of safety stuff going on.
So that changes.
A lot of changes. A lot of changes.
And if you wouldn't mind me saying a few words, I think, when we started having discussions with the organization, certainly as early as a year ago, but certainly as we began to make that change between kind of the Exelon and the Energy Solutions agreement, it was very clear we wanted to put the OPPD employees in charge of their own destiny. And there always has been that kind of rub between Exelon and our employees. I think we really saw the demonstration of capability of our employees over the last year. And one of the things we continually heard from everybody is that as you're kind of moving from an operating organization to a decommissioning organization, you really have to have this mindset shift, and this belief shift about what the focus is. And I think you heard this a couple times during that day, is that even for the 10 months that we have kind of been in this process, really, again, we just took fuel out in November of last year, our organization has really begun to make this shift. And those are tough culture changes, but I attribute that to Mary, I attribute that to John, I attribute that to Mark, to Lisa, and the other members of the senior team that have been actively involved in the nuclear oversight, the decommissioning oversight, and the supporting of the organization very clearly. And so it was great to hear that. It was great to hear that. And I met with the Decommissioning Oversight Committee separately, part of the CEO briefing that I get, and they were just incredibly complimentary of all of our leadership levels, from Mary to the director level folks, to our folks on the nuclear oversight, John and his team, that continually strive to make us focused on the good performance that we need to have. And so it was a very good meeting, and very pleased and very positive. We'll continue with that work. So,
Yeah. Okay, and then I'll have Mary take over, and then John will report.
Thank you. Thank you for those kind words. I have a great teamwork. So, in terms of my report, I just have a few things. We continue, as was alluded to earlier, to do the work of removing the deep water pump motors and the appearances in room 81. Continue with the asbestos removal, which is going very well. The team has shown up extremely well doing that and changing their focus. So that's a tribute to them. We also did receive from the NRC the approval of the Certified Field Handler training program and retraining program. What that really allows us to do is to have that control room staffing, which has been in line with an online plan up until this point. We made this request visuals to us by the end of July. The last approval came in on July 31st. So they are also meeting their commitments and helping us to move progressively down the decommissioning path. We will take about a month to implement this program until the end of August. Just a couple of weeks in September, we'll have this implemented. It will test us in terms of being able to respond to emergency drills. We've had several of those which have gone very well. And the NRC will be out to inspect us on that in October, so looking forward to that. In terms of our fuel inspections, which is really the critical path for nuclear at this point in time, we had two separate activities, as you might recall, visual inspection and the sipping of any identified assemblies that we thought may be suspect of some fuel defects. In doing the visuals, we did found two additional assemblies that we put into the realm of going through sipping. So I have reported here that there were 416 assemblies. We've now changed that to 418. As of this morning, 245 of the 418 assemblies have been sipped, and we have found 13 additional assemblies that have defects in them, and we will continue to complete this activity. Those defects continue to be minor in nature. We should be able to accommodate those. This is really to inform us as to the next step, which is taking the fuel out of the pool and putting it out to the CPAD. And so this is really just something we need to do to be able to provide that information to the cask vendors to ensure we get the right cask, the right packaging, et cetera, for these fuels. That's all.
John, anything you want to say?
Thanks, Director Rivera. A couple of things I would agree with the assessment of the decommissioning oversight committee. It was a growing report, and typically they do tend to be highly critical and point out your areas that need improvement. But while they still do that, they were very positive in the results that we're getting on there. So, they also looked at the nuclear oversight group and said that we are effective in identifying issues prior to them becoming larger issues. We also had the NRC come in and inspect our audit program, and they reviewed 3 audits, recent audits, and said that there were no issues identified with those 3 most recent audits, and that what we call our quality assurance topical report, we are in conformance with that, which kind of is our guiding document for quality assurance of the plant. We did also complete an engineering design control audit on August 10th was when we finished that up. And while they are in compliance and we don't see any areas challenging operations or the quality assurance program, we did identify one area requiring management attention, and it deals with closeout of a package, of a modification package. So we looked at 5 different modifications, and 3 just required better documentation of the result of the modification to ensure that it is compliant. So complying with the resolution and did resolve the issue.
If I can step in.
Yes.
This is why we have gotten such a good report from the decommissioning audit, that the deep dive with the nuclear oversight committee does it. They're in compliance, but this is something else you could do better. And I think this is, I was remiss in saying that, you know, a lot of it goes to you also as far as your
Thanks. We have a good team that does
Yeah.
go in and do the deep dives,
Yeah.
very detailed. The only other thing is we do have a fire protection program audit scheduled for later this month, and we will be looking at, there is some changes with the fire protection program, with the changes going from an operating unit to decommissioning, and the code that will follow. So we'll be working through that. That concludes my report. Thank you.
The only other thing is, as far as people who are leaving or retiring and that, one thing that picked up that Mike and maybe mentioned too, is that the training supervisor pointed out that one way that we're finding out if people are leaving, they're leaving it very open. If you want to leave, we'll help you with your interviews. We'll give you mock interviews to get ready for the next interview. Wherever you're going, be very open about this. If you found a better place to go at this time, we're welcome, and we'll help you even improve your interview and give you feedback, which I thought was really amazing.
Correct. We do a lot of leaving and use this type of job that I'm looking at. It really helps us to plan our staffing, and so it's a great combined effort.
Okay, and that concludes my report.
Give you a break. Public information.
We met on Monday, August 15th, discussing that today, both related to project 5, as well as to separate transmission projects. And we will be seeking permission for easement acquisition if necessary.
But discussed in the pre-committee. So we discussed it.
We did talk about that, though.
We talked about it in pre-committee.
You were correct.
That's okay, correct.
Okay, we have one action item, and that's to approve compliance on strategic objective 5 this past year, and to take it further.
Thank you, Director Kavanaugh. Good morning, everyone. I'm here to report out on our SD5 for customer satisfaction. And I want to point out before I get into it that this monitoring report and the customer satisfaction feedback that we get is important because it gives us insights into perceptions of our customers on how we're performing on all of our other strategic directives. So this customer satisfaction measure isn't just about customer service, but it's also about our pricing, about our reliability. It does include the service component, but it's also how we're performing in the community. Are we being mindful of the environment and a good corporate steward? So with that, our directive really states that OPPD is going to seek out input from our customer owners to understand, and we're going to do this through a nationally syndicated study that helps us to understand if we are meeting our customer satisfaction of what their expectations are for OPPD. And so we've established historically that a score of 700 on the J.D. Power Residential Electric Survey, Customer Satisfaction Survey, would be our indicator of whether we are successful on this directive. There's a couple other components that I'm going to speak about as well that have to do about treating our customers in a fair, respectful, and civil manner, and also to how we communicate a procedure to customers in the event that they do feel that they've been treated unfairly. So in terms of the types of feedback that we get from customers, certainly this directive is focused on customer satisfaction study, but we are getting other input from our customers to really understand what they're expecting from us. So that syndicated customer satisfaction study is a national study that's done independent of OPPD. And so there's firms such as J.D. Power that go out and they survey our customers and they get the feedback, and that occurs whether OPPD participates in that study or not. And so that provides us great feedback, not just about what our customers are thinking about us, but it also gives us insights to how we're performing, and so we can benchmark ourselves against other utilities of like size and in our region. Some other tools that we do use to get additional feedback, the OPPD Online Power Panel is a tool that we have available to us, that we have about 3,000 customers now that are signed up, and they're available to us at any time they've agreed to participate in surveys. And so when you hear us talking about different initiatives or products and services such as like community solar, or even the changes in our board meeting times, we use this tool to go out and quickly get feedback from our customer owners that can be projected to the rest of the customer base. So it's statistically valid data that we're obtaining through this process. We also do some transaction tracking surveys, and this gives us specific feedback after a customer has had an interaction with us. So for instance, when we had our storm type incidents or outage incidents, we will go out and within the next week, the customer will get a call to give us feedback on how that interaction took place, with the crew, with the folks on the phone, with the online system. And then the last item there is our focus groups. And again, this is when we're looking at changing, say, bill statements or something that we provide customers online. We used it certainly during the rate restructuring, where we'll bring in customers, and it really provides us the opportunity to get a deep dive perceptions of and where the customers are coming from, so that we can better formulate a solution for our customers before we roll it out to all customers. So the voice of that customer then is heard, and it's really, the intention of it is to help us make our plans for what we need to do for our customer strategy, determines what we're going to invest in supporting our customers, and the different activities that we're going to be doing in support of customer service. And so some of the things that these have been used on over the past 12 months are integrated energy marketplace, our customer journey efforts, the interactive voice response unit. You heard the report out on that earlier this year. So we used the online panel and the focus groups to get information before we rolled those out, and paperless billing, and then the community solar is probably our most recent one that we did. So now, in terms of our overall customer satisfaction, again, J.D. Power's residential customer satisfaction, we say we need to have a score of 700. When that score of 700 was set, that really was the best in class that J.D. Power had indicated. And you can see that the scores are increasing over the last 5 years here. So I provide this graph. So we've hit our 700. We hit that goal in 2016, and you can see we had another big bump up to 724. We're in the orange, but you'll also notice that the blue, which is the mid-size Midwest average, has also bumped up considerably. So the gap is narrowing between our performance and our peer utilities, and so that's something that we're going to be working on in the coming years. And you're going to hear more about that next month when we go over our strategic initiative on customer experience. So just a little bit of background on the residential score. So when J.D. Power goes out and surveys customers, they ask them over 130 different questions, and it has to do with power quality, pricing, like I said, the community, customer service, our outreach efforts. And so they ask customers what's important to them, and that really determines which one of those factors is most important. So power quality and reliability is a big factor in our J.D. Power score, and we score really well in that area, and it's the most important to our customers, followed by pricing, of course. So those different areas are determined again by customers. We use that data. We do subscribe to J.D. Power so that we can get the benchmark data and determine where we have opportunities for improvement, see where other utilities are doing better. Some areas that we've seen are proactive communications with customers is an area that we're really focused on in the coming years to help bump those scores back up. On the business side, we have always scored very high on the business side as well. As you can see, we had a score in 2017 of 755, but again, that gap is narrowing. And the same process is used. However, J.D. Power doesn't necessarily have a statistically valid. They have a smaller sample size on this. So, but these are the results that we've obtained from J.D. Power over the past 5 years on the business survey. In terms of treating our customers in a respectful and dignified manner, which certainly comes through the customer satisfaction survey, we see that through that. We get that through our transaction tracking surveys. But we also do quality assurance monitoring on our calls. So we are recording our calls that come into the contact center, and regardless of the type of call it is, we have those available for monitoring. And so each rep is periodically monitored. We do deep dives. In addition, whenever we have concerns that do get escalated, oftentimes we will go back and re-listen to the call that took place and understand if there's opportunity for us to coach our reps on how to improve that interaction. And then this just provides a couple of examples. So when we get those transaction tracking surveys, they have action alerts and they have magic moments. And so I got these verbatims from a couple customers that took part in surveys earlier this year. So I thought they demonstrated well OPPD treating customers in a respectful, dignified manner. So the first one says they're just totally professional and caring. You can tell they care. I've never had any issues. Of trouble paying bills, they were understanding. We had a wire down last year and it was repaired very soon afterward. How caring they are on the phone makes a big difference, and that's something that we really stress to our reps, is that our tone on the phone makes the difference on whether that's a pleasant call for the customer. And oftentimes the customers we're talking to are struggling to pay their bills, and so we really stress that being professional and empathetic to where the customers are. And then the next one, I've had no problems. Everyone's been very nice, understanding, and helpful every time I've called. So this is typical of the types of comments that we'll get back from the magic moments. And I will share on the opposite side of that, if a customer indicates an action alert that they were dissatisfied, they can indicate if they want a supervisor to call them back. And we do get back in touch with that customer to understand what happened. And again, we listen to the calls and we do coach our reps accordingly. And then finally, OPPD shall communicate a procedure to customer owners who believe they have not received fair treatment from OPPD. So just to share a little bit about the process in our contact center, when customers are on the phone with the frontline rep, if they have a concern or issue, they want the call to be escalated, we have a group of our most experienced representatives that are considered account supervisors, if you will. So they take those calls, and and lots of times they're just coaching the frontline rep, and verifying how the rep should handle it. But those reps are very important, I guess, in our efforts to not have escalated calls that then come into senior management or the board. And so those reps are taking those calls and typically are being able to resolve them without it going to the management level. OPPD communicates to all of our customers receiving a disconnect notice that they may request a conference if they dispute the proposed disconnection. And this is in conjunction with the state statute that requires that we tell our customers that. So everybody who receives a disconnect notice gets this notification. I believe that we have had very few of those historically. When they have occurred, it's typically been a very complex billing situation that's ended up with huge debt that the customer's has been challenged to pay, and it really takes a bill breakdown to help them understand where that debt came from. And so again, that's very rare that occurs, but I also believe our account supervisors are the ones who prevent that from becoming escalated or to the point of wanting to have a sit-down conference with us. OPPD.com also provides the opportunity for our customers to send emails to see the senior management team or the board of directors. And so, as a board, you have seen those come through. And over the past 12 months, we had about 90 of those, 89, that came in, and those get then dispersed to the appropriate people to be resolved. Many times on the customer items, again, it's going back down to that account supervisor, and it can be easily resolved within the contact center. And then there's others that require a little bit more coordination with others in the organization to resolve the issue. So with that, we have the recommendation, unless you have any other questions or have questions of me. Director Yoder?
Yeah, sure, I have a comment. I noticed that I live in Cass County, and I noticed that each of my county commissioners have on their website their email address and their phone number. I would be happy to have both put on the OPPD.com site. If there is some desire for OPPD to get a copy of what is sent to me through that OPPD.com website, I'm okay with a proxy email that then automatically delivers to both. Or either, or just my email, whatever.
This was requested request has been sent to Kate's area to work on for an OPPD email to go to you, and then a copy would be sent to me as well.
Yeah, and I know we're working on that, that's a good thing, Crowley. I just, FYI, I tried that, and they handle it much better. It's nice to be aware of what's going on, which the current situation is, you know, Joe Jones wanted to talk to you, here's the problem, you get notified, and then they deal with it, so they don't have to wait for me to go deal with it. But yet, I agree, I think this kind of looks better, that they can actually get hold of us. But the best service actually is coming directly from their own people.
I totally agree with that.
But I like the idea
I think if
too.
it goes to both to Kim and us, I
Yeah,
think
that's
that's
a good,
perfect.
I like
But
that.
And you
really
get
like
the
to
ones
know.
that come in that are directed to you anyway, right? So you get copies of those
Yes,
today
yep.
anyway, and then we try to get back with the
But they can't
follow-up
go
on the
directly
resolution.
to us, and that's, sometimes
Yeah.
people, I think, want to do that, just say, hey, I've got a
I've
concern
had
or
comments that
complaint.
people have wanted that, yeah.
Yeah.
Or else I could, they know my phone number.
Yeah, but the service issues, what I'm saying, is I've always thought they do much
Public
better.
sector a lot of years.
I'm in the
tread
phone book.
carefully. Yeah, I understand, and I think that's a fair comment too. Okay, so this afternoon, we will be voting on whether to say we are in compliant this last year with this policy or not. And then, during our retreat, I can't call it retreat, but our workshop, we discussed SD5, and there was some discussion and concerns about the current policy that they, directors and members of the public might like to see changed. Rather than bring it up this month along at the same time we were going to vote on compliance for this last year, we thought that'd kind of commingle things a little bit. So we decided that next month we will be addressing any changes to SD5. And we would ask that during this next month, if any board members, members of the public, and also for management to weigh in on their perspective, to let us know, let the committee know what their ideas are, and we will, as a committee, kind of examine them prior to next month's board meetings, and we will forward any, recommended changes that we feel are, necessary.
So
Okay.
today, though, we take an action item on this presentation that we just had.
Correct.
If
Just
we want to
to-
tweak it, we're going to tweak it later, that's what you're saying.
Correct, yeah, just that we were in compliance with this previous year,
Okay.
with current policy. Okay?
Okay, just one comment on this, though, just so I can think I know where we're going. This is the kind of thing where, to me, I don't think it's that controversial, quite honestly. This shows what we're doing at OPPD for customer satisfaction. Public should know we do this. This is the type of thing, to me, goes on the regular agenda, and we discuss this like we're doing here on a regular agenda, and then you vote on it. Public then weighs in and you vote on it. Right now, this will appear on the agenda. We're not going to go through this presentation again, right? So it would appear on the agenda, we vote on it, and no one knows what we just really voted on. So this is the kind of thing we'd have the discussion in our big open meeting. And then I think you go vote on it. If you don't like it, you don't like it. It is what it is. It's up to senior managers to make sure we're satisfied. But that's kind of the way I'm seeing it.
We're going to have a board discussion at that time.
At that time, so it doesn't look like it's all just a rubber stamp deal, because it's not. Most people don't come to this meeting or see this meeting, but our public meeting is our public meeting. So that's what I'm saying, the discretion of the chair and what's going to be on there. If it's fairly non-controversial, but Julie just gave a great presentation that I think everyone should see. So that's kind of where I'm going. I'm getting a little off here, but
No.
is it?
Well, I think previously, we have had this presentation in the general board meeting and talked about that, and we've had the discussion about J.D. Powers and that we're moving forward in this area, which is pretty impressive, by the way. Congratulations to customer service, even though a lot of people don't necessarily like all the, they don't like it, it's just the J.D. Powers, but I'm sorry if you're comparing with a lot of other people, we're still doing pretty well. And we continue to raise the bar. And actually, the one time the J.D. Powers guy came and explained it in detail and how we can improve ourselves. So their whole idea is, how can you improve the company? And they sort of helped you out and saying, this is how you can even get better, and I think a lot of it was with IT stuff, they had said. which we're working on.
And also, we take that information and we do a deep dive in terms of the levers and so forth. And I just want to
And
take a quick
weaknesses and
moment.
strengths, yeah.
Michael Leary, who is our market research, some of you know him, but he
Yeah.
does a great job. He's also the architect of the power panel, so I wanted you to get to see him as well. But that team helps us go through those drivers in terms of if it's economic development, if it's reliability, the tools and so forth. And then we take a proactive stance on it and put programs together.
Right.
I think what you're going to hear a little bit later is the strategic initiative work that over the next several months we're going to be presenting is really driven on some of the feedback that we received from a J.D. Power survey or from whatever surveys that we received or transactional surveys about how we need to do things differently. And so you'll be hearing about that over the next several months as well. So.
Back on that, if I can, and this is something we talked in the pre-committee. Our role as directors is to really take our customer desires and figure out how we apply those to running a utility. So in the future, I think we've talked about kind of as we evolve the manner in which these board meetings go, having, I don't know, the training is the right word, but providing the directors sort of a summary of what our customer owners' desires are is helpful. And we can triangulate that with what we're hearing on the streets. And it's just, for me, it would be a much more tangible, better way to really understand.
That's a good point.
Because you're right on the front lines, right? And this is all really good data, and we got at 30,000 feet, if not higher today.
Correct.
Okay, go ahead. Anything to add? No?
Just that we are planning to offer or provide more customer trends going forward
Yeah.
on a periodic basis to help everybody understand what customers are asking for, because we do have a lot of good data that we've gotten through
Yeah.
a lot of different vehicles.
Super curious to see.
And that is truly representative of
Yeah.
the customer base,
Right,
which is great.
great. Can I go back to kind of the process that you outlined for how this is going to work? I think this is a little bit atypical because we talked about potential refinements at the workshop. And so I guess at some point I'd be kind of curious, and maybe this is a question for Scott, but sort of what that flow chart is with respect to, so if this were normal, right, so if this were normal, we would hear the presentation from Julie at a board meeting, and then we'd vote on whether or not we're in compliance, right? Full stop, done. And then at the board meeting, is that when we're discussing potential refinements, committee meeting? Okay.
So we have time for that
in the month
long
following?
discussion.
Got it, okay. Thank you.
Next month's Tuesday,
But-
committee meeting's gonna be a lot longer.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
it will be
All right.
longer as you're getting more engaged in
Yeah.
these things. But yeah, 80%, probably 90% of these strategic directives do not require change.
Right.
They're just going through the.
Or a comma here, right?
Yeah.
Like that kind of
The
stuff.
controversial ones, yeah, and you might work on them and say, hey, we've got 6 members that think this point should be changed.
Yeah.
All right, go deal with it and come back with it. But at some point, you gotta keep moving along the process of the SDs, yeah.
Mhm.
That's why I kinda envision this.
Yep, okay.
It's those controversial ones, require more work, but we can't stop our business and just hold up every SD because one person has an issue with it.
Right.
Or two, or let's say I just cannot live with one. Well, fine, that's Tim Gay's point of view.
Mhm.
The rest of the world disagreed, go forward.
Mhm.
So that's kind of where we're at. So you gotta
Yeah,
go
it was
get your
just a
votes.
process question more
Yeah,
than
yeah,
anything.
so just an example.
We're working through that, so it's a good
Okay.
question to ask.
So what was shared with the governance committee today was, so there was some conversation on SD5, I believe, at the Public Information Committee on what some of those future changes may look like. So the committee will have that conversation over the next month or so, as well as other feedback, as Director Kavanaugh discussed. And so also what I think the committee will see is SD2 and SD13. And so the committee will have, at least from the feedback from the workshop, those redrafts of what they look like, and the committee can sort that out, and whether it takes a month or 2 months or whatever that may look like, they'll have that opportunity to have those documents and then come back to the committee on a Tuesday in future board meetings to have that discussion and dialogue, and then determine what the changes would look like and
Yep.
go from there.
Which is great, because what we were asking at the other meeting was we need more of a knowledge base like what you guys have to give us more information, what you're already doing, such as the panels, exactly how do those panels
Yeah,
work?
right.
And how can we, is there any improvement that you think we need, and how, what can, to bring our suggestions in and give you they'd give us feedback right away before that time and then discuss it. So increase everybody's knowledge base of
Yep,
where
yep.
we're gonna be.
So all I would say is Director Kavanaugh did a very nice job of saying, here's what we're doing today.
Yep.
Here's what's going to happen. I think that, quite frankly, because I forget things, should just be repeated at the board meeting. And it would be helpful if we have a date and time for the next meeting where there would be some work. That's it.
Which we do.
Yeah.
Is that it on it? Okay, then system management, we're gonna go director of where I'm gonna be taken off here. One thing though I see on system management though is we have, you're gonna have a discussion, action items on transmissions, easements and all those. I've been very engaged in those thanks to the people that are doing it. They've kept me informed, so a lot of it's in mine and Director Yoder's district.
your two areas.
Wait, before I leave, I just want to say, I'm up to speed on all these things going on. And what I've seen, they've done an excellent job of communicating these to our ratepayer constituents and have done a good job. But like I say, I get the drift of what we're doing. I've heard some very good things from the people I've talked to. The mayor of La Vista called me the other day and says extremely happy with what we've been doing. So kudos to all of you for doing that. So I appreciate it. Yeah, I'll be here for sure. I'll be back right at 1. I just gotta go to.
Cartwheels on the way out.
I won't.
Still waiting to see that.
Cartwheel out of here, yeah.
I'm gonna go. Okay.
All right, the next one up is systems management.
Systems management, we've had a very in-depth discussion. Mr. Davis here, and Mr. Kavanaugh, Mr. Yoder, and discussing these transmission lines and also contracts in excess of 500. I think we'll be here for the contract in excess of 500. The Motorola Solutions.
Thank you. This request for $1.5 million approximately is in relation to our radio system that's used across the district. This is for the services for support as well as hardware and system upgrades needed over an 8-year time frame. So this is a contract that runs 8 years with Motorola to maintain that system in the manner that it needs to for functioning within our environment.
Okay.
Questions?
Yeah, probably, this has to do with the 911 system, is that correct? Or not?
It does in that it is the system that is used jointly by Douglas County, Potawatomi counties, and Washington County for their systems. And part of the agreement that we have with that group, which is the Orion Group, is that we have to maintain a level of service, and that level of service relates to maintaining the system in the current state, meaning current system patches and such. So that agreement states that we must maintain it in that manner, which we would, and we are. And so that's the connection to it in terms of those systems that run in that environment.
And I know there's some discussion between the state and trying to figure out to have a statewide thing. This has nothing to do with that at this moment. This is just maintaining the status quo.
At this moment, it
Yes.
is not, yes. Great question.
Do we use just one channel for all communication, or do we have multiple channels? Something I never thought about.
There are multiple channels within there dependent on who's involved in terms of those different groups that I was describing. They can't be brought together depending on what needs to happen. So yeah, there's different channels within there.
With the geographics of being involved in 13 counties, can we communicate across district lines on the same channel, or do you need to have different channels?
We have interoperability between there to do that, yes.
That was
We have
really the reason.
capability, I will say.
Yeah, that was really the reason why the multiple groups came together originally, was that interoperability related needs and desires. And then we have the capability for our channel on the radio to go across eastern Nebraska and then the 13 counties. But law enforcement have that interoperability capability if they need it.
I have just a definition question. Is interoperability, does that mean the lack of ability or an enhanced ability?
It's a long word, man.
Does it mean it works or it doesn't work?
It means it does work. It means we have the capability to have that interaction between the systems, is what
Okay,
it's saying.
okay, all right.
I think interoperability
Would be with.
Add another syllable.
If you put the UN in front of it.
Extraterrestrial inoperability.
Yeah, so this was really an opportunity for, rather than what used to happen, is that each of those counties and organizations used to have their own systems, right? And now there's a common control system that's used across all those parties together. So in times of emergency or emergency situations, we have that interoperability capability, which is good for this region very clearly. And to Ann's point, or to Director McGuire's point, there is a conversation about what's that look like in the future, because the state is also trying to look at that interoperability across the whole state of Nebraska. So they'll have, that conversation will occur in the future here, so.
So to bring that back to this, in order to maintain that interoperability, we have to maintain at this level.
Yeah.
And to Tim's point, the state is looking at some things here. What we've learned through this is we looked at other states, and they are much more challenged to do this. We're out in front in some ways. In other ways, we're looking at things we can learn from other states as well. So we've done some looking at that. So it's been a good process in terms of what we've been doing.
Good. Okay, if there's no further questions,
Hey, and I do, I'm
yes.
sorry. It took me a little second just to think of the question. Is there a sharing of expenses for this? Not this,
Good
are we in
question.
charge of maintaining, our role is operating and having the system maintained?
Good question.
Yes, so, great question. So yes, there is a component of this where there's a sharing of resources. And so the other counties, dependent on their size and their need, they pay us dollars for what we provide to them for that.
Okay.
Good question. Good question. No question is a bad question, right?
Is that right?
That's correct. That is correct. Next, we're going to talk about some transmission lines, and Mr. Nissen's going to be very busy. The first one is to negotiate and award material and labor contracts for the reconstruction of 7 miles along 114th Street and Cornhusker Road to Platte due to damage of the last storm.
Yes, this is, as you know, we had extensive damage the last storm, and we need to accelerate the procurement schedule to get the equipment we need, materials and labor, to get the line back in service before next summer. And with your permission, I'd like to give a little presentation just to give a contextual overview. Good morning, everyone. I'm pleased to be here and share a little bit about, first of all, high level, as you all know, amazing effort by the men and women of OPPD on June 16th for the storm that we had. And I want to give you a little context of the storm and how it ties into this particular board item. We had straight line winds of over 100 miles an hour and 2 tornadoes come through our territory on that day, as you know. And many distribution circuits were out from North Bend to Syracuse. Many structures were down. We had 9 transmission circuits out of all 3 of our voltage levels, 345, 161, and 69, which is extensive. Over 100 poles, structures down. 12 miles of transmission line were down. As you know, we had extensive customers out, a few days to restore it. And it was the fourth worst storm in the history of our company. From a transmission perspective, if we swing to that, it was the worst storm actually in the history of OPPD, from what our records are for transmission, for the extensive damage. And so the good news is we have, of all those 9 lines, we have all of them but 1 back in service now. And the last one is 7 miles of 345 circuit, which is down still from La Vista to Platte River. And that's the topic of this. We have a very reliable system, even though this hit in the middle of the summer, in the hot June time period, like we referenced earlier. The system's built to be able to handle those types of contingencies, but it's prudent to try to do what we can to get this back in service by next summer so that we don't have to rely on thinner contingencies for reliability. So in the meantime, this summer, we've been managing the congestion related to a significant 345 line that's down. Sometimes it impacts our ability to take future outages to do particular work, or it might impact the way we might have flexibility to run our generation and use that to move it toward our load in our territory. But this is very much an effort to help in the area of reliability. And if you haven't seen, this is just a couple pictures, a little hard to see, but a couple major transmission structures, just like toothpicks on the ground. It was quite a day for OPPD on the transmission side. From a reasons for our urgency, what we really want to do is we want to accelerate the schedule to be able to procure the labor and material for the project. And we kind of are in a balance of a continuum. We could have done it on an emergency basis and just thrown everything at it, but we really don't have that need to go to that extent, but we also don't want to go under our normal schedule and then have it extend into our next summer peaking load. So from a reliability and a generation flexibility perspective, we would like to go ahead and modify the schedule to still go out for competitive bids, but release ourselves of the public bidding sealed bid process under the state statute. And we'll be replacing the wood structures with steel, and that'll be increasing our capacity and our resiliency. So we're not going to build it with exactly what we have in place now. We're going to actually upgrade it to make it a little stronger.
In your opinion, if it was steel on the 15th of June, would it have not been destroyed?
Good question. In my opinion, no. Excuse me. In my opinion, yes, it still would have been destroyed. We have certain standards that we build the transmission lines to, and it's based on miles per hour of wind, maybe inches of ice that build up on the conductor, or how they work together. We do not design our transmission system to be able to withhold tornadoes. So if a tornado comes through, it would just be expansively expensive to be able to do that. So it's a fairly rare situation. We do design it to be able to handle high winds, 90, 100 miles an hour, with no ice, or if you have ice kind of thing, but not tornadoes. So good question. Okay, so this is just a quick picture of what the old type structures look like. Wooden H-frame, and the new ones will be steel monopole. These are same type of design as we just installed in our Midwest transmission project. So good quality transmission system. So with that, unless there's any other questions, swinging over to the board item itself, we would like to accelerate our schedule. And like I mentioned, we're still going to have competitive bidding, but we're just going to request permission to release ourselves for the sealed bid portion of it. You might be wondering about reimbursement on this. FEMA will reimburse us for up to about 3/4 of just an in-kind replacement, which is a portion of what we will be spending. And then we may get some additional reimbursement on top of that, because we are adding to the resiliency of it. So we'll see how that goes.
I've got what I have as a quick question.
Yeah.
Can you maybe a new board member question, can you help
Sure.
me understand the difference between what the whole process is and what it will be in this situation?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Requires a 2/3 vote, first of all.
I'm sorry?
Requires a 2/3 vote.
In order,
Yeah.
okay, so that's helpful. Yeah, I kind of want to understand, in your bid process,
Okay.
by not having sealed bids, how much time are we gaining?
Yeah.
And how does that change the process from
Good
what
question,
you normally
Director
go
Moody. From a timing perspective, we will probably gain a month and a half, maybe 2 months in our schedule, which allows us to accelerate before the June timeframe. And we have a formal sitting down sealed bid submittal process and a meeting where those sealed bids are actually in a session all open together and then evaluated together in a very formal process to be able to interact with any of those particular bidders up until that time.
So they're all present for the opening at that time?
Typically, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so, and Steve, if you have anything to fill in on that, that's basically the main difference. So it allows us to be able to negotiate, interact with people in a little less formal way according to the statute.
Right. So you're not going to have that sit down and open all at once. They'll come in, you'll open as they come in on a flow basis. Is that kind of what I'm understanding?
It varies from procurement to procurement, and but I think typically what management will do in this kind of situation where the board has approved an engineer's certificate is to set a particular date for the submission of initial proposals. And then following that, there will likely be some back and forth. And then it's narrowed down to the vendor that's then selected. So, that's what I would expect.
Between us and a vendor or two that we're trying to determine who we're going to use.
I'm sorry?
When you say back and forth between us
and
Yeah.
and the other
Yeah.
and the bidders.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Our supply chain management, our technical engineering folks, any of those kinds of things to address contractual issues or
Still use
technical
the
systems.
same, I would say qualitative or quantitative kind of review.
Right.
Yeah,
The
good
best
point.
bid, right?
Thanks.
So
Yeah.
most competitive,
That's
best
right.
bid,
Yeah.
best contractor.
Meets
kind of
terms and
roll that
conditions,
together,
meets terms and
to make sure
conditions,
that
all
we're
those
doing
things.
the right thing. This, again, I think the reason for the engineer certificate is just to speed up the 60 days, otherwise it gets us into about August of next year. And we want to be able, during peak times, to have this transmission line back in service. And that's part of the issue.
So help me understand, what value are we losing by, obviously, I mean, the time thing, I get it, and I think that makes sense, but again, I'm trying to understand, what's the value that we're losing?
I don't think we're losing any value. As a matter of fact, you may be getting additional value by sitting down and doing the negotiations.
Right.
Yeah, it's quicker and in many respects more efficient, because when you're looking at something unique like this particular transmission line, you're able to sit across the table and resolve any differences you might have over the specification, perhaps over legal terms, although that's usually not too much of an issue.
Right.
And it's just much more flexible.
Yeah.
When you're looking at something that is as time sensitive as a major transmission.
Okay. That was my read on it. I thought I was missing
Yeah.
something.
No, you're right.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Tim, I had a follow-up
Correct,
question
yeah.
for this. Did I hear you say, in terms of money reimbursement, that we might get a little extra because we are adding resiliency?
We can ask for it, and we may, but it's not a guarantee. So it happens at times. If X amount of the total amount is what it would cost to replace it in kind, we would get 3/4 of that. But if we're going to spend an additional Y amount on top of that in-kind replacement, which we are in this case, you can apply to FEMA, and they, at times, depending on the situation, depending on how much is happening across the country, those kinds of things, I believe, you can possibly get some reimbursement from FEMA for upgrading resiliency.
And you had said this is the greatest amount of damage we ever had on our transmission lines in the history. This is even comparing to the ice storm back in '96?
Yeah, that's a good question,
Does that have
Director
to do with
McGuire.
money, or does that have to do with?
1997.
Yeah, 1997.
Oh, you would know that. It's his fault, by the way, he just came on right after.
We all remember it very well.
His first day. No.
Good question, and I think the best way to explain that is, in the ice storm, much of what happened there was ice buildup on leaves that were still on the trees, and that weight tore the branches down, falling on top of distribution lines. Okay, the way we, and we'll get into this in a little bit, the way we maintain our easement around transmission lines, it makes it so that trees, should that happen, shouldn't break and fall off and get into a transmission system and knock it down. But on the distribution system, when you have snow like that built up on those leaves, it just tore the branches down and tore down the distribution system. So that was very extensive damage from a distribution damage perspective, but not at the transmission level, because you don't have trees up over the top of the transmission
And they're
lines.
very clear NERC guidelines
Yeah.
around transmission.
Yes.
And in distribution, we have a little bit more flexibility around those.
Yeah.
Certainly transmission are.
Yeah, you're
qualifications
required by NERC standards at the higher voltage levels to actually ensure that you don't have any tree that's underneath there that's going to get up and touch it, or that should something happen that a tree branch might fall off and fall over into it. But tornado or straight line wind with ice build up on transmission is kind of a different story.
As long as people know the difference between transmission and distribution
Mhm.
lines,
Yeah,
and I
good
think
point.
there's some confusion with that. Yeah.
I think the next question goes to Javier. Javier, we're not gonna get this fully reimbursed through, you know, where are we gonna come up with $1 million or millions of dollars?
It is part of our capital program. So we will get reimbursed for 75% of in-kind replacement. The question here is the timing, right? We will fund the initial construction, and eventually we will get reimbursed for that part. In the meantime, we will use our own funds to float that.
Transfer those out of other
The rest of
construction
it,
projects, or are we gonna use those funds that we're gonna use on this project, will they come from other construction projects that we've already been planning to do? Okay, so we're shifting the priority.
Right, so we
Got
have,
it.
we have a capital plan, we have capital projects ongoing in flight right now. We have a certain amount of dollars that we've allocated this year and the following year, and we go through our capital prioritization process. In this case, this is what I would call a sustained investment. We're investing on infrastructure that we already had, very, very critical, very important. It would obviously rise to the top in terms of prioritization, and it may push other less priority projects out into the future.
Very well.
Yeah, and in fact, that is the case in the prioritization process. It would push something else that might normally be on the list, because we're not going to raise the ceiling just because this came into it. So, yeah. Well, with that, the item is for approval of engineer's cert for authorization to negotiate and award contracts for material and construction so that we can rebuild this in a timely manner.
Mr. Director, that requires a 2/3 vote, is that correct?
It does,
Because
right.
it's waiving that, so that's 6 votes, yeah. Okay, next we have the La Vista Transmission Project easement acquisition. Tim,
Very
take
good.
it away.
Thank you. I'll just stay up here, keep right on chatting. Okay, as you're aware, we have 2 significant transmission projects, Sarpy County Transmission Project and the La Vista Transmission Project. Got that pulled up, thank you. And for these, what I want to do, first of all, is just point out a couple of people in the room. Lisa's team and our team have been doing a lot to align on these particular projects to ensure that we're doing stakeholder engagement efforts very much consistent with, for a transmission project that we're doing with other projects around the company. And I want to acknowledge Jake Farrell's in the room over land management, Steve Fanslaw as well, and Tom Richards. As you know, all 3 of these amazing key team members that have been engineering and working this through lots of within the company and local leaders and the customers themselves. So really want to acknowledge those 3 folks for the effort that they've made to bring us to this point. So big picture here, a transmission project has stages. And this presentation really focuses on the first 2 stages. The first one would be stakeholder engagement, where we go out to the public, we introduce the project to the public, and we get their input on what the route should be for the transmission, or inform them of what's going to be happening with the project. And the second one would be easement acquisition. When you build a transmission line, you need to maintain an easement underneath it, and these board items are to obtain that easement and use eminent domain if necessary in that obtaining of that easement, whether it be temporary, which would happen throughout the construction of the project, the permitting of it, or permanent after it's in place to be able to maintain underneath it. And this is, we've done a lot of work to try to assess where we're at in these 2 phases, to improve on what we're doing through benchmarking and so forth, and then as well to keep doing what we're doing that's really working well. So hope you'll see that in this presentation as I introduce you to these 2 projects and kind of talk about each of those first 2 of the phases. Following after that, of course, you would have the design, the construction, the in-service of the project. So the purpose, first of all, I'll step you through Sarpy County Transmission Project. The purpose of that project is to serve the scheduled growing electrical needs in Sarpy County, a lot of the Papillion area and the surrounding area. This is about a 5 to 6 mile, 161,000 volt line from 114th and Giles to 144th and Schramm area in Papillion. And this is needed. It's not based on speculative load. It's clearly planned and expected load to happen. A lot of capacity and reliability will be improved through this. Timeline, high level, local leader meeting we had, and the public open house we had already, and we'll have another second local leader meeting in early September before we announce the route. And then we'll construct it in the summer of 19 and finish it by the end. So this is just a picture of the information that went to the public for the open house that we had for Sarpy Transmission Project. I'll point out to you the two substations I mentioned on the upper right and lower left, and we are going to route a transmission line through any one of these pink segments to get from here down to here. And the study area that we have is all in white, and so that's the area that we're collecting information from the public for. It's been a very good process. I will note that the route has not been selected at this time. We're collecting input, and we're evaluating that against the criteria that we have to site a transmission line. In the stakeholder engagement phase that I mentioned, we'll continue to do some things that have been working very well. We're going to inclusively collaborate with the community through public meetings and digital output, digital media. We're going to partner with the public to evaluate the area, and include landowners and stakeholders and elected officials. We've been doing that a lot up until this point, and we'll continue because we're in the middle of that phase. We're going to continuously improve through several ways, and these very much have been from things that we've looked at through benchmarking, but also from input from our customers themselves in the past projects that we've had. We've been using formal letters of invitation instead of postcards that we've done in the past. We're using the clear OPPD logo rather than a project logo. We're cross-referencing our normal databases with the county courthouses to our OPPD customer databases for addresses to make sure that no one falls through the crack when we're inviting people and sending them information. And then we're benchmarking with various entities, right-of-way association, industry experts. We have started market research. This is really leading the industry item here. What we're doing is, for each one of the phases, we're going to start asking the customers, what do you think about how that went? Did you get your invitation? Did you decide to go, and if you did, how was it? To the public open house, for example. If you decided not to go, how come? How was your interaction with OPPD and the information you got, even though you decided not to go? We're collecting that data in for the SARP transmission project, and actually the initial results of it look very good, that people are favorable upon OPPD, whether they decided to come, to example, for the public open house, or decided to not, for whatever reason. So that's a leading the industry kind of thing. And then we're going to continue to, we'll use that data as a baseline, and we'll continue to get better from it. And then we've been trying to keep senior management and the board and elected officials very much more informed than we have in the past. Now shifting to the next phase, the easement acquisition, some of the lessons learned we've learned there. At the Elkhorn River Valley Transmission Project, we used an incentive to try to pay folks a little bit extra if they would negotiate and settle with us sooner in the easement acquisition process. And we really didn't find that to be overly successful or impactful, so we're not going to plan on doing that anymore going forward. The landowners are very much more informed and have a greater ability to organize and communicate. They desire to capitalize monetarily as much as they can, and we'll recognize that through the process, and we'll continually investigate acquisition alternatives. From a benchmarking perspective, in this case, OPPD's, we really have lower condemnation rates that we've had recently on our projects than some of our neighbors have. So we're doing well, but we're going to keep getting better. We're also having our OPPD legal support looking at some case law for trends in what's happening, and we're going to learn from that, and we'll continue to calibrate our easement acquisition language. So strategy going forward on this project, we're going to keep, for STP, we're going to continue to have third-party appraisals done from an independent appraiser, and these are certified appraisers that we're using. And actually the Nebraska Department of Transportation has a list of appraisers that they're comfortable with in their work, and we always make sure that any appraiser we would use would be someone that would be identified on that type of a list as well, as a double check. Transparent and flexible negotiations, negotiate easement language and structure. Just remember, in easements, the customer continues to own the land. We do not, and they're able to use it, but they have limited abilities to use it. For example, they can't plant tall trees underneath it. So we'll negotiate that, and we're going to keep getting better in this area and strategy through continuous process improvement, like obtaining a broker's opinion to get a good trend on how things are looking in the area from a cost perspective from a broker. Provide full appraisal to owner, And this is another leading the industry area. This has not been something that we've been done in the past, and we're going to continue our ongoing benchmarking. So that's the Sarpy County Transmission Project. Shifting to the second one, in La Vista Transmission Project. This is a joint effort between OPPD and the City of La Vista. It's been a great partnership so far. And what we're doing is we're going to replace and reposition 2 miles of 69 kV line to help them with recent community developments, including the city center in their area. In this particular case, we're going to go from 72nd and Parkview to around 96th and Harrison and remove about 2 miles of existing facilities and rebuild it in another area to better serve the residents and the businesses and accommodate the new growth. And one thing this will do is, as you'll be able to see a video in a minute, is it'll give us better access to the new line should we need to do maintenance and repairs. OPPD held an information table at the City Council meeting just this week on Tuesday. It went very well. I know Steve and Jake were there, and we had about 10 folks from the public come to visit with us and to learn about it. In this particular case, people along the route themselves were invited, and they came and had good questions. And actually, we went, and one of the team members went to their site and visited with them in some of their homes in that group of people to just try to explain the project. And it also was discussed at the City Council meeting and went very well. So a lot of support and partnership there. Timeline on this one, OPPD is going to do the permitting and right-of-way activities first quarter of next year, and we hope to have this in service by the end of the year. Just give you a little picture of this one. Again, we have a substation here that I mentioned on Parkview and 72nd. This is Harrison Street, and this is the 96th substation. The existing line right now is the light blue line and the red portion here. And this is the this shape here is the New La Vista City Center. And we have the current line here that does not go along a particular road that we'll be removing. And then we will instead reposition the line to go along 72nd Street and along Harrison Street along the south side here. This will allow us to have access to the new line around the street and help us to allow us to rebuild it and get it out of their path for the city center.
This, is that correct? And are they,
Yeah,
as far as
good question.
financing of this?
Director Meyer, it's a partnership where we're both clearly benefiting from it, and yes, there will be, and actually just get to that, there will be reimbursement for this for OPPD from La Vista to cover the cost of this project. So we have consulted very much with the city officials and the leaders with La Vista. And it's just a great partnership between the two of us. We've picked the best route, the underground that would go underneath the city center versus the overhead route. And like you just asked, we will be reimbursed for that. In this particular case, it's a little bit different strategy for public involvement. We're discussing it with the folks along the path of the transmission line itself. So it's a targeted engagement. And I mentioned a few of those came to that city council meeting. And we had the invitation with a brochure with this type of information for them, and we also we had a letter, and there's 3 sets of people there. If you look back to this picture, you have the folks that have equipment removed. They had a message for them. Folks that have equipment added, and then a small portion where there's not going to be any reroute. Some of the structures might be actually moved a little bit, but not rerouted. So each of one of those got an individual message from us, along with a brochure on the project itself. We've supported, as I mentioned, the city council meeting. We've had joint meetings with council members and the city of La Vista multiple times through the process. It's been very good. And again, on this particular one for stakeholder engagement, we're trying to keep you folks involved and updated on a regular basis. So shifting from stakeholder engagement to easement acquisition on this process, just to wrap up, we'll utilize something very similar to what we do on the Sarpy County project. We'll continue to obtain a independent third-party appraisal. We'll obtain a broker's opinion and be transparent and flexible. And again, leading the industry will provide full appraisal to the owner. And in this particular case, where we're able to, along that particular path, we'll move structures to accommodate as much as we can. Certainly talk about that with folks. So with that, unless there's any questions on the presentation, we have a pretty neat Google satellite flyover of the two different routes to show you. And if you struggle with motion sickness, this is not going to be a good thing to watch. So you might want to look away, and I can just kind of tell you what it does. But basically, Christy, go ahead. And, yeah, so this is the substation on 72nd Park. And let me point out a few things that you're seeing here. This is the best Google will do for you. It kind of has half the structure shown, but this is the right-of-way in here. The blue line is a CAD add-on to the Google satellite, so that's the conductors itself. So this is the existing line that I said runs in place now in people's backyards and so forth across golf courses that does not go along any particular street. So it's much more difficult to get in and access if we need to work on it.
Are we headed south or north?
We are, good question, we're heading direct west right now.
Okay.
Direct west. Coming up, this is the area where the city center is going to go in. We're coming up to 84th Street now, so the city center would be in here. So we're basically getting out of the way of that particular project. And now we're heading north and west over to the substation across ball fields and more people's backyards. So again, this is a 69 kV transmission structure with wooden structures.
You'll take these structures down in the winter, is that what you had said?
Yeah, let me check my notes. I think I've got that down here. So we're
harder grounds.
yeah.
It's frozen, yeah.
I think so. So we just got onto Harrison Street. Now we're heading straight west again, and we're going to head and jump across to the street to the substation. You're going to see it swing around, and now you're going to see what the new route would look like, the new reposition, leaving the substation, and then going down what would be on the right side now, the south side of Harrison, heading direct east right now. And so you can see this is people's residential areas in here. Their backyards backs up to Harrison Street. This is in public road right-of-way right now. So much of this work will be done in public road right-of-way. And what we'll be doing is there's already a lot of distribution along here. So every so often we'll just be replacing a distribution structure with a taller transmission structure and then continuing with the underbuilt distribution underneath it. So you might ask as we're going down here, here's some businesses that we're going by. Why do we need to acquire easements along here? Because if you have a taller structure, which we will with transmission in place now, where we only have distribution now, you have to allow swing out easement for the conductor itself. So if the conductor swings, and if it's a much taller conductor and taller structure, of course it's going to swing further out than a distribution would one. And so you've got to clear trees and make sure there's no structures so that the easement will widen as you add transmission in addition to the distribution itself. And then the last thing I'll point out here is you can see this would have much better access for our crews to be able to get up and fix something should it fall down for any reason, like the recent storm. This one did not fall down in the storm, but should have in the future. And now we're at 72nd Street heading straight south, and we'll head back over. Again, this is the particular area here that our transmission will be over, and we'll dip across the street and head back into the substation. You're like, what would be the appropriate music for this kind of? It's a little silent. I feel like I need to keep chatting and Chariots of Fire. Yeah, or that'd be a good one. So with that, we have two very similar board items for each of these two projects, which is why I wanted to introduce you to them. I won't reiterate a lot of the details that I just shared with you that are on the board items themselves. I will mention to you that easement acquisition is very routine. We do this at the beginning of any major transmission project for requesting the board permission to use eminent domain if necessary. We wouldn't plan on doing that. We wouldn't hope to do that, but if necessary, it's an item that we need your permission for. On the SARP project, it's kind of interesting. There's about 170 structures that will be removed on that removal route, and there's about 65 structures that will be added on the new route. So that's kind of the number of people. La Vista, thank you. Said the wrong one. Yeah, thank you. La Vista. Yeah, the removal on La Vista. So we'll have many more people affected from removing out of their backyards than we'll be adding to, and about a 15 on that last segment where it's added. So what we do is we acquire easements voluntarily. We'll be doing that in the first quarter of 2018 for La Vista, for example, and we would use eminent domain if necessary after all reasonable efforts are made to acquire easements voluntarily through good faith negotiations. And then this would be reported to the board if it's necessary that we need to. Yeah.
And these people will be compensated for it along the new route?
Yes, for the
Okay.
easements that we acquire,
Uh-huh.
based on that third-party independent appraisal, yes, they would be compensated for that easement right that we acquire.
But they don't have any inkling currently about, or do they know that something, a new line is going to come?
Well, actually, both, everybody in the study area for Sarpy County has already been given a mailing with a brochure that introduces the project, shows these same types of pictures, shows the objectives, explains what the structures would look like, and then an invitation to the open house, of which some folks came.
Perfect.
Okay, La Vista, we didn't have the study area, but we sent the same type of information to everyone on the route itself, either the removal route or the addition route. So they've all gotten information in the mail from us, and then we'll follow up with them throughout the process for the easement acquisition as we get to that stage of the project. So.
Okay, thank you.
I think, did I answer all your questions on that
Yes.
one? Okay.
So as far as timing then, La Vista probably will be going in first, is that correct?
Yeah.
And then Sarpy.
Yeah, let me look here. La Vista, first quarter of 18, with La Vista, yeah, the first quarter of 18 is when we'll be doing our permitting, any permitting we need to do, and getting right-of-way acquisition negotiations started. So first quarter of next year we'll be doing that. Second quarter we'll be constructing, and we'll be trying to get that in service by the end of
18?
Of 19, yeah.
Of 18 or
Excuse me,
19?
end of 18, thank you.
Okay.
And then we'll come back in first quarter of 19 and restore property. And that reminds me, that's another thing we do. We would reimburse anybody, we would pay anybody that we actually do damages for. We would come back and pay them any money it takes to restore their land to as good or better state, so at the end of a project. And then Director McGuire for the Sarpy project, it's a little more extended out. Like I said, we'll announce that route in September. We do the design work in 17 and 18, and the right of entry easement acquisition work would be then in 18 and 19 we'll do the permitting and the easement acquisitions, and then in the end of 2019 we would have that project in service. So it's a little more extended out.
Was there any connection between
The Thompson Creek project and this new project? The Thompson Creek was the work done, and I thought it was 72nd or 84th.
Yeah, it's similar. If I recall right, that was all distribution. I might swing over to Jake or Steve Fanslaw on that. They're both very familiar more than I am with that, but it's a similar kind of project, but it was a distribution project.
Yeah, Thompson Creek was very similar, but it was distribution, so we relocated distribution on the backside of this coast along Thompson Creek.
Okay.
So they put us for all those houses, and we should our distribution on the backside of the creek, the front side of those houses.
Okay.
Or the distribution.
Okay, you got it, thank you.
But we did a similar stakeholder engagement. Jake's folks did that type of interaction with them on that as well. So, any other questions on that?
Just got a couple. The La Vista one doesn't specifically call out temporary versus permanent easements. I assume we're pursuing, because Sarpy, I think temporary precedes the permanent ones. I just assume we've got temporary easements that we'll be pursuing for La Vista as well.
I'm reading my board action letter that does say temporary and permanent, Director Moody, at the beginning for La Vista.
I'm looking at La Vista, facts C, negotiations to acquire the easements voluntarily will occur, so it just doesn't specify temporary and permanent.
Oh, in
which
the action
Sarpy
item
one
itself?
does. Yeah.
You're right, in the introductory paragraphs it does, but in the action item it doesn't.
Require temporary. Okay. So it's a timing issue. Okay, thank you for pointing that out.
Yes.
So I want to give a high five to the team. I love how we're learning from our previous transmission
Good.
projects.
Good. Thank you.
I think a lot of the changes you've made are really exceptional. I noted that we're doing market research on the SARPI. Are we not doing market research on the La Vista one as well?
No.
We'll be talking, it's more of an engagement with the city officials and so forth to make
Okay.
sure, from a feedback. So we will learn from that as
Okay,
well. but
okay,
we're
so
not
we've got a
gonna be doing
mechanism in
them-
place.
yeah.
Maybe it's a little bit different. Okay.
Yeah, I think the intent of this is on the full-blown kind of stakeholder process we're doing on the Sarpy County project.
Yeah, it's a little
Was to really dive into that one for sure, look at the whole stakeholder process.
That's
This
a
is
good-
kind of a modified stakeholder process.
Yeah.
because of a close intertie with the city of La Vista and the work we're doing with them.
SARPI project will give us a better baseline for a typical stakeholder outreach process. A
Okay.
better baseline through the market research, and like Tim said, the La Vista is a little bit modified
Right.
of a process, because the project itself is very different.
Yep, okay, that makes sense. And then, it's very curious to see where the current line in La Vista is. And I don't know how frequently we have lines that sort of cut through backyard, transmission lines in particular. If that's something that's common?
So remember, those transmission lines were there before homes were there.
Yeah.
Right?
I assumed.
Yeah.
Right.
And so they build around.
Okay.
And so we have had them periodically through backyards that we've now moved them out.
Okay.
I think when we did a transmission line on F Street and 72nd, we did some removals and did those kinds of things. So
Yeah.
now we can't go across, kind of catty-cornered across. We have to use, right, so it's a
Yeah.
little different
Okay.
rules today.
Just an FYI, I know over in Lincoln, there are concerns about developers developing close to natural gas pipelines. Similar utility, I mean,
Yeah.
that, is on the outside of town. So, yeah,
It
so.
was out of thought, out of mind before, right? Okay.
So those existing distribution lines that are in the backyards, we already have easements for those? So we don't need to get easements for those, but we just need to tell them we're gonna be coming in their backyard, which might be even more problematic.
Back to my point, we already have an easement, but we need to get a wider one.
Get a wider
Because
one?
the structure's going taller and.
No, I'm talking about taking out the ones,
The blue line.
the blue line, the removal, yeah, you already have easements for those, is that
Right,
correct?
we really don't need anything
You don't
except
need anything
to
other
take
than
out
good
those
communication,
assets. Right,
because
correct.
Communication's gonna be key.
communication's gonna be key
And to make sure
there.
we treat them well, as you go in and
Yeah.
have big equipment to take out poles and
Yeah.
infrastructure,
And if
there
they've
will
got
be some
fences and,
Gardens,
yeah,
property
gardens, yeah,
and coordination.
a lot of coordination. You're gonna be busy. Mr. Fancelon and his crew and Jake are gonna be very busy.
We'll be going door to door.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the type of thing that we would do routinely. Jake's group on a project, door to door, especially the property damage at the end kind of thing, as well as the easement acquisition. Steve's help.
On the property damage, or when people get a pole taken out and who does that? Do they hire somebody and then submit the bill to OPPD, or does OPPD come in with the landscaping company and fill the hole?
For the restoration for property damage?
Yeah.
I think typically we would request the customer do that themselves, and then we would reimburse them. True, Jake? Yeah.
This one in particular is unique, you guys are touching on some. Sorry, Jake Farrell. This one's a little unique in the aspects that. Hi, thank you. I just want to touch, this one's a little bit unique in the fact that we are in some very dense residential backyards. So we're given the opportunity that we can either take large equipment in there and pull the poles out in their entirety, which will cause a little bit more damage than, the other option would be that we'll come in with some lighter equipment, dig down 3-4 feet, cut them off, fill them back in. That's a lot lighter equipment, a lot less damage. But yes, we will usually ask for a couple bids from a company that they feel comfortable with, and then pay them to have that work done to restore it.
But we would fill the hole.
Definitely, we would fill the hole.
On the surface that would
Yeah.
be impacted.
We're really good at putting transmission lines up and taking them down. We're not fine graders, so we'll get it to a reputable state and then have them do the fine grading with somebody that they're comfortable with. So. All right. Thank you, Jake. Thank you.
Any questions?
Any more questions? All right.
Just have one thing, you just brought up the idea of how much much coordination you need in the entire company between customer service, public information, and transmission and distribution on this type of thing. Thank you so much.
Tim, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Next up is the Governance Committee, and its Director Mick Mines.
Thank you, Director Barrett. Committee met this morning, and first on our agenda is to revamp the way we are meeting for this particular meeting, as well as our committee meetings. We've talked about this for a bit, and the Government Committee is recommending that we move this monthly board committee meeting to Tuesdays at 8:30 a.m. And this, as we meet as a whole, we will generally hear all of the information that all of the committees would hear if they met individually. And the reason for this is so that everyone gets input at the same time on each issue, and we can flesh it out in this meeting, as opposed to going to a committee, and the committee decides, and then comes to us, and we have all kinds of questions. So we thought we'd cover it all at one time. So the recommendation from the committee would be to move this board committee meeting to Tuesday at 8:30 a.m. until whenever it's over. This meeting will go quite long sometimes, but everyone will hear the information at the same time. Doesn't mean that we won't have committee meetings that are necessary sometimes, but this should eliminate many of those. Any questions?
It's a solid plan. I like it.
It's what's necessary with the new policies, you know, to really give due diligence to these policies. We're gonna need that extra time.
Okay, and then the next item is Best Place to Work for You surveys. And Mart, who's presenting?
So I want to introduce Angela Galloway from my team. She's a senior organizational development consultant, and she does all the heavy lifting. She does coordination of the design, the administration, the delivery of results, and then helping the organization with action plans around the survey. Erin Brown, who is an industrial organizational psychologist with Quantum, who is our survey partner, is going to do part of the presentation as well. So.
Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning, directors and senior management team. I'm going to start a couple slides, and then, of course, I'm going to leave to our data analysis. She's done in our account for quite a number of years, and we'll be able to give you some insight. Again, due to time, we may be a little quicker, but you have all the information in the slides that were given to you ahead of time. We sent out a survey with over 60 questions in June. That was this year's survey. The last time that we did a survey was in 2016 in January, so we had a good 18 months that happened in between. In those 18 months, a lot happened in our organization. So engagement is something we are wanting to make sure that we're doing okay. We take a look at things like accountability, decision-making, engagement, safety, teamwork, respect, and how are our managers doing in their effectiveness managing our teams that go through. This is a little highlight of what the survey did from June 15th to June 7th. We talked a lot about our storm that happened on June 16th. We extended our survey time frame to make sure our crews could get in there, our customer service people could get in there and take the survey. We did go down in participation rate. Maybe that was due to the storm. We do not know. We will not be able to tell until we begin to dig down into these teams about what's going on. So that was 69%. And the overall score was 74.4. If you look at what we got in 2016, 18 months before a lot went happen in our organization, that was 74.9. That is a very small drop of 0.4 to 5 that happened in there. I'm going to do this quick, if you don't mind, and then I'll get to the scorecard and you can go. Overall score, this is what it looks like. We just, Quantum likes to show us always what other utilities look like, what other benchmarks look like. This is where our pattern has been in the last 3 years that we have used them for our survey analysis, and he'll dig a little deeper into what this is. Just to show you on our scorecard, we did not make our scorecard again this year. We are pushing ourselves to meet 77% to the year of 2020 to be at 85. Why such a stretch? 85, Quantum would tell you, in their surveys across the nation, 85 is the best of the best. Why wouldn't we want to stretch? So we have some work to do to get up to that level. So what I'll do is, if you don't mind, Erin will take us through the rest of those slides.
Thank you all for having me. So yeah, as we get through this, one thing you saw a score of 74 on the prior slide. This is another metric that we have called our engagement profile. Essentially, we bucket each employee that took the survey into one of four things: either highly engaged, moderately engaged, barely engaged, or the very end of the spectrum, disengaged. The goal state is to get that highly engaged number as high as possible while reducing yellow, red throughout the years. The one thing I would say here really quickly on red, those are the people that, for better or worse, sometimes they exit the company faster, and sometimes the company is better off when they do exit because they are fully disengaged at that point. Yellow and red, though, those are areas that we know we have a chance to improve their perceptions over time. The first benchmark that we have is versus our engagement clients. These are the clients that I work with one-on-one throughout the years. We have different benchmarks or different groups. Utilities, national same size top quartile. The same size is between 1,000 and 5,000 employees, 1,000 and 5,000 employees. I will say in my history working with Quantum, utilities, government, manufacturing are among the lowest rated groups usually. So national same size is quite a bit higher. They are usually groups, finance, insurance, things like that. The next benchmarks that we have available are our best places to work clients. These are regional competitions that we host throughout the year. These are not clients that I work with specifically one-on-one each and every day. They're more so just competing for a national recognition. And this is really, at the end of the day, kind of what we are shooting for. So getting up to that national same size, regional same size, national same size top quartile area is kind of really the hope for OPPD. So as you can see, we do have quite a bit of ways to go. We're at about 26% highly engaged. A national same size top quartile, those are the ones that are like winning these competitions, about 74% highly engaged. In order to improve engagement, we provide each company that we work with a top 10 drivers of engagement. These are the items that we correlate back to our engagement outcomes, essentially things like discretionary effort, intent to stay, employee advocacy. Those are the outcomes we want from your employees. And in order to improve those, these are the 10 drivers that we would focus on. So the first group that we have here is items related to vision. You can see they're sorted by most to least favorable. So 35% say they know how they fit into OPPD's future plans. That's down about 10% since the last survey. The next group is vocation. At OPPD, I have the opportunity to do what I do best every day. Core values make me feel inspired, and I see professional growth and career development. That last one there is down about 14%. And there are some pockets. Obviously, nuclear was one of the ones that is very low rated on there. So there are some pockets that are driving that down. And then the last group is values. SMT values people as the most important resource, about 37%. All the way down to I noticed positive change as a result of the last survey, just 28%. This is really the big kicker here, that last item. Whether or not people feel that their voice, their opinion mattered, was listened to, reacted to, and changed in a timely manner. A lot of the times what I see with organizations is that they do very well in terms of making change. They just don't do a very good job in terms of communicating that change back to the employee and said, hey, we heard you. This is what we did with your feedback. So overall, these are the 10 items that I would always recommend an organization focus on. These are your 10 drivers. They do change from company to company, from year to year. And you can see that some of these items were among your top 10 drivers from 2016 as well. So they're recurring themes, things that we want the organization to focus on, things that are important to your employees that really do impact their engagement over time. Now we're going to get into a little bit of group differences. So we'll go quickly through some of these slides because I know we're kind of tight on time. So category summary, first thing here, most to least favorable, and here's the 2016 differences. So in the red is where we saw a decline, in the blue is where we saw an improvement. One thing to really note here, decision making is up about 15%. There was one item in particular that is driving that. My direct manager makes the effort to follow up on decisions that are made. That went up about 30% of that item. So there is good communication in terms of follow-up on what's happening. We do want to make sure, though, in terms of survey changes, based on their employee feedback, that managers, leaders are saying, yes, this is why we're doing this for you, not just simply filling you in on what's happening, but giving you really the why behind that change. Group favorability scores, overall favorability across all items on the survey, public affairs most favorable, nuclear least favorable. In 2016, you can see those scores labeled in there. So a few declines, a few increases. We looked at the comparison between these two items. I see professional growth, and if I contribute, I know I will be recognized. And you can see they are very well correlated. They rise and fall together. So these are two important items. Those are among those top 10 drivers. So you can definitely see some opportunities for improvement. These are areas that we would say, again, opportunities kind of across the organization, and they're going to look different depending on what group you're working in. So growth and development is going to look different for public affairs versus energy delivery, energy production. The next one, business unit, again, overlaid with whether or not their work group developed action plans to address issues raised by last year's survey results, and then whether or not they noticed positive change as a result of the last survey. Again, you can see that the more likely that people said, yes, we actually met as a team, we worked through action plans, we put some commitments down on pen and paper, the more likely they were to say that, hey, there was follow through. Things happened, things improved in my work area, in my workspace, among my team. But those groups that said, no, we really didn't do any of that. We really didn't talk as a group. We didn't put action plans in place. Their perception of whether or not their feedback was heard went considerably lower. A few groups to look at. I would call your attention to mainly the groups on the far left there. These are more than 75 responses. So the dark blue is really the 2017 percent favorable. The lighter shade of blue is the 2016 percent favorable. So you can definitely see some areas where there were some decline, some increases there. So Energy Plaza down 6%, Elkhorn Service Center up about 5%. The groups on the far right are much smaller in comparison, but we did want to call out some of those areas that had some good increases and some decreases as well. Even further breakout, so hopefully you guys can see some of this stuff, but across the division breakouts, these are all the larger divisions. They decreased in favorability since 2016. So definitely consistent decline in some of those areas. But overall, if we look back at that initial score that we saw, that 74, overall, we're seeing fairly stable results. But we do want to make sure that, if we're going to hit that 85 goal, which is a good stretch goal to go towards, we do have to make sure that we're hitting home on the biggest areas kind of first. Those are the ones that are going to take a lot longer to move over time. Just a little bit deep dive into Elkhorn Service Center. I'll go quickly through this one, but essentially you can see some of those lower rated areas, again, survey effectiveness. So this theme keeps popping up as opportunity for improvement, just making sure that we know employees hear that we heard their feedback, that we're doing something with their feedback. This is extremely important. I can't tell you how many times I've seen companies go through this process only to see their results go down or tank from one year to the next, and it's simply because they're not doing well at communicating the why behind the change and making it very personable to the employee. One thing that we kind of looked at with generation, it's kind of interesting. We always collect demographics, gender, tenure, age, ethnicity. Millennials do tend to be among your more favorable. They're slightly more favorable than Gen X and baby boomers overall, which is always a good thing. We actually see the opposite nationally. Millennials tend to be the least favorable. I don't have to go into the millennial discussion too much. As you can tell, I am one. But we wanted to know this item. Would it take a lot to get them to leave? Kind of what's driving that perception of whether or not a millennial, a Gen X employee, a baby boomer, what really would take a lot to get them to leave? So for millennials, the most correlated item was I see professional growth and career advancement. So essentially an employee that's kind of looking up the ladder, coming into the organization, if they don't see an opportunity for themselves up the line, that is going to increase the velocity of exit, essentially, from an organization. For Gen X, kind of similar to millennials, but now talking kind of more future-focused of what does my future look like? So not just my career advancement, but really kind of what is my place in the company? How do I know that I'm going to be valued and that I'm going to play a role in kind of our success? And then lastly, baby boomers, not as much focus on their career path, because a lot of them have already achieved kind of where they want to be or are hoping to be, but they do think about recognition and making sure that their contributions are recognized by the organization. So with that, we went through those very quickly. I know this meeting's coming up on a close, but just wanted to give you 3 strategic recommendations for what we found out. Essentially, the first one is survey effectiveness, survey follow-through, making sure that we are working with our employees, talking to them about the results, communicating action plans, consistently communicating what we're doing. I would call for monthly or quarterly updates, either from leadership or their team leaders, to really kind of go through the motions of here's the results, here's what we're doing, here's what we're not doing. And then probably the best thing that we can do here for continuous feedback is making sure we can tell employees why not when we cannot do something for them. I read a lot of comments from employees, and they have some great ideas for what could be done, but they all involve high costs. We want an on-site daycare, on-site gym, free food every day in the lunchroom. They want all these things, and it's great if you can give them to them, but we have budgets to abide by. So just making sure employees know when and where and why not, or why they can get the things that they're asking for. Connecting OPPD's future plans for success to the development of individual employees. This is a disconnect that we see quite often for employees, where they have an idea of kind of what their role means to their immediate team. They know how they make their boss successful or they make their coworker successful, but they really have no clue sometimes about how they make the organization successful and what that means for the future of them. You can definitely, I think, about this in the energy sector. I mean, probably the big topic on a lot of people's minds is renewable energies. What does that mean? How do we play a part in that? And employees are going to have those questions too. Sometimes they're thinking a bit faster or slower than they don't even know that's an issue yet or a thing to think about. So renewing those conversations, we would call for monthly or quarterly conversations. The worst thing we can do is just have them once a year. The best thing we can do is have them multiple times a year. And then the last one, building momentum on making employees feel their contributions are valued. The one thing I always like to talk about here is that we need to supplement the formal recognitions that most companies are very well, they do a very well job at, very good job at. They give out tenure awards, they give out service awards, they give out yearly sales goals and bonuses. But we need to supplement those formal recognitions with more frequent, less formal day-to-day recognition. And it's not just simply like, hey, thanks for showing up for work. It's more so recognizing them as a person, recognizing their interests, really recognizing kind of who they are and what value they bring to the organization. Those are the 3 recommendations. 1, survey follow-up. 2, career growth and development. 3, recognition. And the worst, so we'll kind of skip one more slide. These are next steps, and I can let Angela speak to these if you like.
The next steps are really, we have completed the rollout all the way from Tim's senior management team to all of our managers, have seen the exact same thing you guys have seen, very transparent. The organization sees the same thing. Now we're asking teams to get started and get to work. So there is one group, there is a strategic initiative team that's working specifically on corporately what are we going to do. There's a trend, there is something that we can see that employees need to have an experience. What is that going to look like? And that team's going to kind of dig into this data, do more focus groups, kind of figure out what that is. But then each vice president, we really are encouraging, there's action plans in pockets of our organization, and we have to figure out what does that look like. Asking those managers to not only understand their team's results, they need to share it and they need to make action on it. And that action is due at the end of this month. So there's a lot of flurry and scurry, but a lot of that is to say, get it started and then keep that message alive. And so we're using a great tool that Quantum has for us. So we're going to be able to kind of track what's going on, where is it at, and then just like Quantum has indicated, we're working on what do we do for that monthly check-in. How do we not only communicate what's going on, but even tell the good stories out there. There's some really good work that's happening quietly. No one really puts together. That's why they were doing the initiative, or that's why the outcome happened. And so, and then I'm encouraging the non-great stories, the ones that had the fall and step and try it again. And because I think we find that those are the most easiest ones for us to go, we're just like that, and to put that together in their stories. So any questions you might have for Aaron while he's still with us this morning?
I might just share from a senior team perspective. So what we do in our monthly review is a variety of things. What are our financials by business unit? What are our business plans by business unit? Obviously, there's two components we're adding and we'll be adding here. One is we do have a safety kind of action initiative around our management observations from a senior team that we're going to be reporting on. And then from our business unit side, what are we doing in our business units around this quality of work life, around our best places to work, around our engagement survey and our action plans. And so we'll be sharing what we're doing in our business units, and then each month kind of what our actions are and what our performance is around each of those elements. So that's one of the ways we're trying to put action on it, and then obviously cascade it down throughout our organizations.
I think that's a great idea. I think that's what's necessary here. because
Sure.
We didn't really see much improvement from last year. In fact, it went down a little. And I think that's the only way you can
Yes.
improve is to have action.
Yeah, so, and this is not, there are no excuses to this, right? So we're very,
No.
very clear and intentional about the direction that we're going and our plans. You know, we did have a major announcement, all right, on the ceasing of operations at Fort Calhoun. We're also changing our kind of structure around the organization too. So
Huge change.
we're moving to a 5-structure organization, and that creates, you know, some of that tension around the organization as well. And so we're going through those changes, and we understand some of those impacts to that. So I don't know, Mark, you want to add anything else to that at all? But
No, I think both of those are major factors, but, you know, I think we're fortunate we didn't see a bigger drop, given some of the things that have gone on. But we certainly are focused on what we're gonna do to get to the strategic directive 8 number of 85. So we have a lot of action plans that'll be going on.
yeah.
Yeah. You know, in many ways, our strategic directors put a lot more pressure on the organization too, and it creates change. And with that change comes a lot of anxiety of the unknown.
There's a little bit of that, right? So there is a
Yeah.
little bit of
As
pressure
everybody
around
goes-
those.
Yeah,
and,
there's pressure on those, and there's anxiety with that, and I think it's reflected here, and I think this is a good way to move.
I think what we're seeing with those strategic directives and how we're cascading them in the organization, we are increasing accountability around the
Yeah.
organization very clearly from this team, the senior team that's here, and obviously in the next levels in the organization. And so, you know, some have engaged that very proactively, and some have struggled with that. So that'll be our leadership challenge as we move forward.
So I'll also mention that the 2 strategic initiatives that I have responsibility for will give you a little bit more information. So one of them is the Best Place to Work initiative, and you'll see that in one of our upcoming strategic initiative reports. And the other is on accountable management system, which is what we're doing to restructure the organization. So you'll also see that in a short period of time.
Okay, any more questions for Angela and Aaron?
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your
Great
presentation.
business partner.
Thank you. We've got another item, it's an action item, that will be our progress with our unions. And Mark, do you want to cover that?
Yes, so the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, IBEW Local Union 763, and the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Lodge 31, have voted to accept the tentative agreements that we came to with their organizations. And we are presenting a high level of that and asking for your vote to accept those contract agreements today. So Steve Kerrigan is going to give you a presentation on what some of the major changes are in those tentative agreements.
Good afternoon. Good to be here today to seek your approval for these tentatively agreed to contracts between 763 and Local Lodge 31. Just in most of the specific details are located in your packet, so you'll have the specific details of each. And like Mark mentioned, we're just going to hit the high-level aspects of these labor agreements, which both have been approved by the memberships of their unions. First, from a historical background, if you remember, and we've talked previously, beginning in 2007, OPPD had began this process to modernize our health benefits. And that was framed against rising health insurance costs for our active employees and retirees, and just the economic pressures that we're seeing, especially to our pension system. So over the course of the last 10 years in 5 different negotiations, both OPPD and its union partners have agreed to a series of groundbreaking agreements that reformed our benefits. Things like the creation of our Voluntary Employee Benefit Association Trust to fully fund the company's share of post-retirement benefits for our retirees. The creation of a cash balance retirement plan, which is still a defined benefit plan, but moves away from what we would call the traditional option into one that looks more similar to a defined contribution or 401k. And additionally, we had the unions agree that all new employees effective 1/1 of 2013 would be mandatorily put into that cash balance plan with the eventual phasing out of our traditional option. And we've also increased pension contributions over the years and changed some of our rules and how we define our benefits in a pension system. Additionally, we've also seen changes on our health insurance side with the elimination of our outdated HMO plan and some of our previous PPO plans and creation of a new high deductible health plan back in 2007, and then in 2012, once again, mandating all the new employees move to that high deductible health plan. So with that background in mind, we went into the 2017 negotiations looking at some of our opportunities of what we wanted to focus on. Number one was health insurance. How can we balance employee choice and employee empowerment while at the same time recognizing that we are seeing, as any other company in the nation is seeing, the rising trend in health insurance costs and the trend in health insurance costs overall. How can we get savings out of that while working with the unions on future savings and choices? From a pension standpoint, we wanted to make a commitment not only to our employees and ourselves, but to others, that we have a continued commitment to the stewardship of the pension system. And we wanted to focus on our employee contributions into that system and how we can make that mirror what we are seeing others in our utilities and other government entities are doing. And finally, from a wages standpoint, 2 things, competitive and comparable. We're in a very difficult labor market. How do we attract and retain our talent in the company while at the same time being comparable to the other utilities and peer groups that we see out there? Our approach and process, it was a company-wide collaborative effort that we began in 2016 that touched all aspects of the business, bringing in different groups and people for their thoughts and running those ideas through senior management for an overall strategy. And it also brought in outside surveys and comparability of our peer groups and other utilities too. Our negotiation team was a cross-functional team with expertise and education from various areas of the company so that we'd have both a historical background and we could bring some current perspective to our negotiations. The themes, as we get into the tentative agreement, I want to talk a little bit about the themes we heard in negotiations and sitting down with our unions, especially the 2 we're talking about today, 763 and 31. The themes we heard was, 1, a concern about the pace of change that we've seen at the company and in the utility industry as a whole. And second of all, stability. Their membership was looking for something they could have a foundation for as we go through these changes over the next several years. And with those in mind, we reached this tentative agreement. The highlights of this are, from a health insurance standpoint, we were able to create 2 new health insurance plans, a new PPO plan that we're calling PPO 750 and a new high deductible health plan that we call HDHP 2000. What those plans will do is increase both deductibles and out-of-pockets in each of the similar plans for a savings of approximately $1.5 million in 2018. Even more importantly, and this gets into when we talk about the length of the contract, we were able to negotiate with the parties a reopener language so that beginning on January 1st of 2019, we will have the ability to reopen the negotiations to discuss further collaborative efforts with our union partners on health insurance changes moving forward. So we'll get a second shot at this if we need to in working with our union partners. Once again, I won't go into the specific details of those health insurance plans, but like I said, the changes in the deductibles and copays, additionally changes in our prescription drug copays, should bring significant savings for us moving forward. From a pension aspect, we were able to negotiate an agreement with the unions to increase employee pension contributions from its current level of 6.2% to 9% by the term of this contract, which is 2022. That is significant in that by the end of 2022, it is estimated by our third-party benefits consultants that will bring approximately $4.9 million savings to the pension system. Additionally, what that does, it puts our employee pension contributions at pretty much a similar level to what we're seeing our comparable utilities and other government entity employees paying.
Was that 4.9 million in the 5th year?
Yeah, by the end.
5 years combined.
That's by the end.
Per year. Per year.
Not per year. That'll be total by the end of the
It's the life
term.
of that.
Over the 5 years?
Yeah.
It's over the 5 years. We'll have 4.9 million additional employee contribution to the plan.
Correct. Additionally, too, similar to the health insurance, we were able to negotiate reopener language once again on January 1st, 2019, that the parties can reopen the contract to discuss further pension changes and negotiate those. The wages and lengthened contract, we were able to negotiate a 5-year labor agreement effective June 1st, 2017, which means any wage increases will be retroactive to that date. And we were able to negotiate 3% wage increases each year for the next 5 years. While that's a little longer length of contract, it fits in with the themes that we heard from our employees about stability and trying to build upon the pace of change moving forward. Additionally, the 3% number is comparable to our utilities and other government entities that we've seen. Those top three bullets hit our major goals going into the negotiations. Some other items of note for these negotiations, from a health savings agreement standpoint, we agreed to raise our health savings account contribution an additional $200 for each employee, which will help offset some of the rising costs and deductibles and out-of-pockets. Additionally, on our company match, we increased our company match from our current $3,500 to $4,000. That actually is a similar match that we previously had in years and is similar to many other companies. Sick leave is an interesting negotiated item. What we've seen is a willingness of the unions to partner with us on those unique cases where we have employees who sometimes, actually through no fault of their own, are potentially just too sick to work here, or are having issues where they're using excessive amount of sick leaves, or even sometimes, and really in the rarest of cases, have abuse of sick leave. We were able to negotiate with our unions to come up with a system whereby we put into the contract management rights to take action on those employees. And those actions will be a progressive manner in working with the unions, one, to get the employee help if they truly need it, but two, at the end of the day, and after a longer term process, if the employees just can't do the job because of some sort of illness or injury, that we would shift those employees away off of the job and into other avenues, including long-term disability and things like that. This is important because it counteracts previous arbitrations that we've had in the area, which kind of questions our management rights in that area. So it was an important one for us moving forward as a management tool. The call-out pay we've increased up to a previous level that we had previously negotiated 5 years ago. It was exactly similar now from a call-out pay perspective to what our comparable utilities are. We saw that in our surveys of them. Meal allowance was increased from $12 to $18. That just reflects inflation. It hasn't been touched in a number of years. Extension of probation, that highlight is another management tool that we were able to negotiate for new employees who come into our position and are on a probationary period. This will allow us the opportunity, if we're having job issues with the employees, to extend out that probation with their agreement and work with the employee to ensure that they can maintain employment with us. We added some language about job abandonment that we didn't have. If an employee just for some reason never shows up to work again, how we would treat those. And finally, we created labor management committees on our memorandums of understandings. This will be an active committee over the next 5 years to be able to take all those multiple memorandum of understandings that we currently have in our contract, start working those into our contract language so that you don't have a contract that's this with memorandums that are this thick. It'll be a little more balanced, if you will, and easier for the employees and managers to use. Once again, high level and quick, but from an overall standpoint, we believe we hit our goals. The $1.5 million in 2018 for the health insurance changes and savings, showing our commitment to the pension system by the increase in the contributions and the reopener language during this labor agreement time, and the comparable but competitive wage increases that we offered. And I'll be happy to answer any questions that you guys have.
Steve, I have a quick question. How does this, the projected, and I hope it gets approved, this compared to the exempt employees at OPPD? How does that compare? Is one
Sure. From a health insurance standpoint, it is our position that all these health insurance changes will be applied company-wide. So exempts will have the same health insurance as negotiated with 763 and 31. And then hopefully it looks like next month, I will hopefully be bringing you 1483's labor agreement, which they have tentatively agreed to but are currently voting on. And it's the exact same economic package that we talked. So from a health insurance standpoint, company-wide, we will have the same health insurance changes. From a pension standpoint, it will also be company-wide. Everybody's employee contributions will be going up to 9%, exempts included. From a wage standpoint, generally speaking, from an exempt standpoint, those are done based on performance measures and things like that. But a 3% increase from a union standpoint, it generally fits into what we've seen not only from a local standpoint, but from a national standpoint. For example, the Society for Human Resources, SHRM, the national HR organization, came out with an article just within the last month that, generally speaking, 3% across the board has been the wage increase we've seen over the last several years. So from a wage standpoint, those are hitting the same.
All right, that answers my question. Thank you very much.
So let me build on that. So in terms of the wage increase, it's comparable to what we're seeing from SHRM. Are our wages where they're currently at in terms of comps for most of these staff are they 100%, 120?
Yeah, I would say from our salary surveys, what we saw for these two particular unions, from 763 standpoints, we were approximately about 1% behind the midpoint of our other utilities. So this 3% will bring us right back up to them. Same with Local 31, actually. They were actually right at the midpoint. Okay. So we think this 3% will keep us right in line, once again, with our midpoint of our utility. So we will not be the highest, we will not be the lowest, we'll be right in that middle area where, based on the CIR, that's exactly where you want to be.
Okay. Help me understand, we talked about health insurance and the impact on deductibles and out-of-pocket maximums, but premiums was never really, is that something that the market sets that we really don't have any control over, or help me understand?
So our premiums are set based on our experience.
Okay.
So what we do is every year we have our benefit consultant go back and look at the last 12 months or the last 18 months if we can, and look at what our experience has been, and then we work with Blue Cross Blue Shield of Nebraska to set our premiums based on what we've seen.
Okay.
We hope to have a premium decrease this year, so we had some good experience. So we're
Okay,
hoping
so
to be able
those,
to
but
announce that
essentially
shortly.
the history and the market fluctuations.
Correct.
So in other words, we're not going to institutionalize those in an agreement.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I will though point out, we do have to negotiate the actual percentage amount
Yes.
with the
Yes.
union, so, which is
The percent
currently
of the premium that we're
20%.
subsidizing?
Yes.
Paying for
Yes.
it? Okay.
The actual dollar amount, though, we set.
And what's that percentage?
An 80-20
80/20,
share.
okay. Couple more questions. Always interested in your perspective on the tone of the negotiations.
Sure. I would say, being this is what my first major negotiation since coming with the company, it was kind of a feeling out process for both sides, trying to build the relationships and trust with the unions, and difficult because of the pace of change and some of the things that have been going on in the company. You never really want to jump into negotiations after some major business decisions, but that's the world we live in now. So they were very fruitful, a lot of discussion, a lot of good discussion. And I think it's a testament to our unions in this process to come to this agreement that we did. They are willing partners in this. And I think that's something in the negotiations that I was able to teach to some of the cross-functional team of managers that I had, that as we go through these changes over the next several years, the unions want to be partners with us. They don't want us to announce something and then drag them in at the end and say, well, here, will you agree now? They really want to be a part of the planning and the strategy process. And where we've had success, and I would say at Fort Calhoun being one of the greatest examples with some of the memorandums and maybe this agreement, is where we bring them in on the front end and have them part of the process. And so that came out a lot during our negotiations, and I think that's why we were able to achieve the results we did.
Okay.
You know, I really like the transparency here. This is about the first time we've ever had this in an open committee meeting before we went to actually go vote on the actual item, on the action item of this. So I appreciate this, that it's all out, it's you know, in the open, everybody can read it, and I appreciate that. Nice job.
Thank you.
One last question for me. I can't help but think, you know, we just talked about the engagement survey, right? And now we're transitioning to this, and I can't help but think about how those two are connected, and noting that I think 58 of the 61 survey questions are union scored lower, if I remember correctly. So and this is not quantifiable, right, in the same way that we can quantify savings, but
Sure.
I'm interested in thoughts on the potential impact from an employee engagement standpoint.
I would hope this helps, especially from a stability standpoint. I mean, for the next 5 years, your union employees and us, from a planning perspective, will know what the wage increases will be and what the terms of the labor agreement will be moving forward. It's maybe that eye of the hurricane, if you will, as change spews about around us. I think, especially once the wage increases are implemented, hopefully upon agreement, this will help engagement too. I mean, and as Director McGuire said, it's also part of our transition to be more open about this process too, so that everyone can see what's going on. Not only our employees, but from a management standpoint too. I've been trying to drag in a lot of our different units so that we get their perspective on these agreements before we negotiate them, so that labor relations isn't those scary people in the corner that nobody wants to talk to. But
You know, Director Woody, I would just say this too. So these are always interesting on the timing of these. And so there was a lot of not knowing what was going on behind closed doors by the unions and by management on what that will look like. And so, once now it'll be very clear on the direction of kind of what we're doing and where we're going. And then I think what you'll see is the best places to work kind of outcomes that you'll see over the next couple months here. But then on the engagement side, I think it's going to be really important from our leadership engagement piece, from the frontline supervisor to that middle management, to engage with our employees. And I think that's going to be our focus very clearly. And where we see really high ratings in engagement are those leaders and supervisors that are engaging very directly with those employees. and doing it just incredibly successfully. And sometimes it's in our lowest paid parts of the organization, but that leader is just exceptional in doing the work. And so that's really, I think, the difference between maybe where we are and where we're going. That'll be the difference. I think what we typically get are high ratings of pay and benefits for my family and those kinds of things. That's high. Safety is high. I think those are all good things. We had some perception saying, when we're going through negotiations, we typically see, poor safety records, right? And when we kind of went and did the facts and brought it back to the organization, it's like, no, that's not what happens, right? So don't use that as the excuse of accountability around safety items, that we're in negotiation, therefore we're going to be, less safe. So we've tried to dispel some of those myths. So, but anyway, 18 months from now, we'll see what that impact looks like. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Great work to Steve and the team and everybody else that supported him. So
Yes.
thanks, Steve, including the unions. I think Steve's point is very clear on this. Without union leadership that's open and understanding kind of the direction that we're going to be competitive, to be affordable, to kind of change, we would never be able to get to kind of where we are. So.
One last presentation. If Senior Director Foch is still with us, you're on board. Strategic Initiative Overview.
Yeah, this is just really in follow-up from the workshop on the 24th. I wanted to make sure that we had on the calendar, once the committee schedule had changed, the time and the opportunity to really walk through in more detail the strategic initiatives, all 7 of them as part of business transformation. What we're planning to do is throughout the next 4 months really have 2 initiatives per month. So in September we would propose customer experience and financial sustainability, for example. What each of the initiative owners and program managers would have an opportunity to do is provide more detailed information around the overview and the scope of the initiative. What are the key considerations and trends that are really driving these initiatives? What's the framework for the work in front of the people involved? What progress has been made to date? What are the milestones or key decision points moving forward and the immediate next steps? So this is a little bit less of a presentation and more just for your awareness around the calendar that we're proposing here. Again, customer experience and financial sustainability. Mart alluded to accountable management that would show up in October. Best places to work and cost and process updates in November. And then our innovation initiative in the integrated energy marketplace in December.
We discussed on the Tuesday.
Yes.
Yep.
Sounds awesome.
No questions? Well, then I move that the board go into closed session at this time, 12:39, to discuss the corporate officer performance review of President and CEO Tim Burke and compensation matters. With respect to this matter, a closed session is necessary to prevent needless injury to the reputation of the individual involved, and the senior manager is not requested in public. No laughing. So you're going to read the second part? You got that?
Can I get a second?
Second.
Wait, let me take a vote.
Oh, yeah.
Barrett?
Yes.
Kavanaugh?
Yes.
McGuire?
Yes.
Mines?
Yes.
Moody? Yes. Schroeder? Motion carried.
And then I say the motion to go into closed session is passed. This closed session will be limited to the discussion concerning the corporate officer performance review of President and CEO Timothy J. Burke and compensation matters. No votes or board action will be taken during this closed session.